Good evening, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle-earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast, I say it every week, I'm going to continue to say it until everybody knows it in their heart and they can repeat it verbatim, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. Steve, do you know what movie that's from?
Dude, no, I have no idea.
It's from Casino. No one ever gets it. Sorry. A couple people get it. Greg knows it. Nate Tice knew it. Aaron didn't. You didn't. This is disappointing for me. I'm always a little sad when people don't get it. But nonetheless, part of the Cover One Sports Network. I think the best when it comes to Bills content, football knowledge, content creation, like kind of making a name, adding new shows, expanding a little bit. Got some expansion tonight on Disguise Coverage. For those of you watching and those of you listening, you're about to find out. Got a little bit of another super show feel, much like we did last week in addressing the needs of the Buffalo Bills offense. I sent the word out and put the bat signal on in the Cover One DM and said, hey, I'd like some friends to join me on the show. And lo and behold, I had some friends answer. Mr. Aaron Quinn from the Cover One Buffalo podcast, Mr. Steve Mathis from the Air Raid Hour, both answered the call. Anthony Romeo is also scheduled to be here. He's a doctor. He's got doctorates. He's a busy man, so he's probably out,
doctoring.
Right. That's what I was going to say, or like he lost a pipette or some Bunsen burner on whatever he's
working on. Is he a doctor
on,
like Doctor Strange is a doctor? Or
no, he's like biology something. Bio something? I don't think Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is like a surgical doctor.
He was like a
I just remember he didn't appreciate the tweed jacket joke I made a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, really? What joke did you make?
Tweed jackets.
I don't know. I just made some crack about every adjunct professor wearing a tweed jacket.
Oh, I do remember that. He's got a lot. He's got over, like, I'm going to ask him when he comes in. I'm pretty sure he stated, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he has over 100.
I've seen the picture of his closet. I don't know how many it was, but
so he's big.
And they were like color coordinated.
Yeah, he plays no games. And I mean, I wouldn't either if I had a doctorate and I was sweet into suit coats and jackets like that. But he should be joining us tonight. And we got a fun episode planned for you guys. Again, last week we went over the Bills offensive grouping, went through the different position groups, and we priority ranked each position grouping on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being this position group's fine, run the same group back, we don't need to do anything. 5 being, oh my God, red alert, everything's terrible. We need to bring stuff in, free agents, draft, whatever, fix this position grouping. So scale 1 to 5, we did that for every single position grouping on offense. We're going to do the same tonight, but a little more granular. We are going to talk about defensive tackle. We're going to talk about edge. We're going to talk about linebacker. We're going to talk about corners. And we're going to talk about safeties, break down each of those groupings and talk about, again, like where each group ranks in terms of their priority need, what needs to be addressed, what needs to be changed, fixed, stay the same, all that kind of stuff. Aaron, before we get into that, let's talk about this Bills defense a little bit. It's a group that has suddenly become, we talked about it a little bit on last week's episode, but it's a group that is suddenly like much maligned and talked about as if it was atrocious. And we talked about a little bit of the recency bias because of how the year ended. But this is a group that, despite the QBs that they played and so on and so forth, they were a strong group in 2021, and all is not lost when it comes to the Bills defense.
Yeah, no, this is kind of the drum I've been pounding here this offseason, because obviously that Kansas City loss was terrible. I'm not going to sit here and defend that defensive performance against Kansas City and say that was good or acceptable in any way. But that doesn't mean it's also all that performance, right? Like, you have to look at the entire season as a whole. And the common comment that I get as a rebuttal to me is, but they didn't play anyone, right? Like, they played all these terrible quarterbacks, these terrible teams. Stats like DVOA, which I know we all love and we dig into every single week, though accounts for that. It's schedule adjusted. It's defense over adjusted. So it accounts for how other teams are also performing against these teams. And the Bills were still the best, almost in every single category. Not just that they were the best overall defense, they were the best passing defense in the NFL. They were still top 10. I think they ended up 11th overall in rush defense, but top 10 for the most of the year.
Yeah, they were 11th in rush DVOA.
Yeah. And one of the more interesting things is we talk about pass rush a lot, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a lot tonight. Their adjusted sack rate was 7th overall in the NFL. So one of the better teams, top 10, ended up being a top 10 team in team overall sacks. They didn't have any double digit guys personally, but that rotation still was a top 10 rotation in getting sacks. So I think when we take a step back out away from that Kansas City game, and you look at this defense, and it's not all that bad. Now, there's flaws. There's things that need to get fixed, especially, Eric talked about it a little bit today with how deep they're going nickel as their base going forward. There's probably some flaws and things that they need to bring in that we don't quite have. But we just need to pump the brakes on it, that it's all bad. Tremaine Edmonds sucks. There's no good players in the, along the defensive line. We need to rip this all down. We need to get rid of Leslie Frazier. Like, it's not that bad. So there's flaws, things that need fixing. We want to see some improvements in some areas, but it's not this terrible defense just because the performance in Kansas City was terrible.
Very good point. Steve, same kind of, thought your way. What are your feelings on the defense going into this offseason? Is it a group that you think needs like an overhaul? Is it scheme related, or are they just a couple pieces and tinkering and tweaking away? Like, how close to the edge are you when it comes to this Bills defense as a whole going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at it, you head over to social media and stuff, and you see like a lot of people doing mock off seasons, right? And there's like 7 or 8 changes. This defense doesn't need to make 7 or 8 changes, right? This entire football team probably doesn't even need to make 7 or 8, starting lineup changes. But I think maybe the defense gets a little bit more scrutiny than the offense, obviously because of the Kansas City game, because Trey White might not be ready for week 1, because your next in line at starting corner, Levi Wallace, is a UFA. Your one tech defensive tackle, Harrison Phillips, is a UFA. And your two, I wouldn't say arguably 2 best, but your best defensive end, Jerry Hughes, is a free agent. And probably one of your rotational pieces, Mario Addison, is a free agent. So I think the question marks about who's going to come back, who's not going to come back, also sort of plays into this a little bit. But to me, this is a team that's, and we're going to dive in deep specifically about what needs to change. I think some personnel needs to change in a couple of spots, specifically the defensive tackle that lines up next to Ed Oliver, or the rotational guys that come in after Phillips and Oliver. And I think we maybe need to see an adjustment of the type of athlete we bring in at cornerback number 2. I was someone who, after the season was over, I was interested in possibly moving on from Leslie Frazier, because I think that Frazier and McDermott might be getting too comfortable. I've mentioned on multiple occasions, there are positives for being so in sync with the people that you work with, but there are also negatives to the point where you maybe don't challenge yourself or bring in outside ideas. I think once you lost Brian Dable, once you lost Bobby Johnson, once you lost your special teams coordinator, Heath Farwell, I think that idea went out the window, right? You don't want to have too many changes over the course of an offseason, but I think it would behoove the Buffalo Bills to make some changes. Like I think the first thing we're going to talk about is defensive tackle, right? Like the Buffalo Bills, as Eric pointed out on the film room, are asking guys like Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano to 2-gap. That's got to change. Is that because they don't believe in their defensive tackles? Or is it because that's McDermott and Frazier's scheme? Like, that's what we got to get to the bottom of here as Buffalo Bills fans, to sort of figure out how the Buffalo Bills can be more successful on defense with lighter boxes against some of these teams like Kansas City.
I think that's an awesome point. And, to connect both of your guys, opening thoughts here with, basically what I'm echoing in a similar regard. This defense is a good unit overall, but there are tweaks that need to be made based on a matchup quality for this defense. Like overall, I said it maybe, I don't know, the week after the Bills lost. Everything is a blur. I'm still upset of how they lost that game. But they're a good defense, but they have certain matchups that they do not do well against. The speed of Kansas City is one of them. But then again, the caveat to that, who matches up well with the Kansas City Chiefs offense? Like who is,
and every team's got some team they don't match up. Well, it's a matchup league, right? That cliche always exists. So
that's 1,000% what it is. And the Bills they just had certain matchups this year that really kind of exposed certain things. Kansas City in the playoffs, granted Tre'Davious White wasn't there. The matchup against the Colts the first time, that power type run game, running at you type of thing, where again, maybe potentially some defensive tackle help and a guy who can 2-gap and clog up the A helps a little bit. And there were others that happened as well, not to, go down the rabbit hole too much in that regard as we start to move forward here, but they're a good defense. They struggle with certain matchups given the roster construction that they have and personnel combined with the type of scheme that they play on defense. And in order to overcome those matchup difficulties, you start to add different types of skill sets, different type of player capabilities to your defense, which then rounds out your ability to play matchups and to be able to throw rock when the opponent throws scissors, so on and so forth. So you can continue to stay versatile, stay multiple. And I think that's something that people really need to key on, because it's not just that reactionary piece where, well, the defense sucks. Everybody needs to go except for, Steve, to your point, like everybody but like 3 people need to go. We need to sign this and this, trade away this guy and this guy. This person needs to be signed. We have to draft this. Like, it's not a DEFCON 5. I think 5 is the highest DEFCON. I always reverse the order there. It's not a DEFCON 5 or whatever the highest level is for DEFCON. It's not that scenario where, you know what, screw it, burn it down, start over. It's not that, but there are certain tweaks in specific groupings that need to be made from a frontline perspective, and then other positions that need just some depth or versatility pieces. And that is where we're going to start in tonight's episode. Before we get into that and start diving into the priority rankings, I want to say 2 things. One, want to shout out the sponsor of this show, One Pie Pizza. See them at Twitter at One Pie Pizza WNY. You see their logo in the bottom right corner of your screen, which I think is an awesome logo. I like the color scheme. I like the logo. I like the font. I like all of it. Even more than the logo and the font, the color scheme. I like their pizza. It's delicious. The cup and char pepperoni. They use not too much sauce, so it's not like that saucy, messy kind of pizza. The cheese works out perfectly with the sauce. It's a sweet sauce. They make their own blue cheese. The dough is beautiful. It's nice and crispy, but soft at the same time. It's quality. It's art. It's delicious. I say it every week, and I don't just say it because they're a sponsor. I'm tremendously proud of the relationship that I have built with them and that Cover One has built with them. They make a tremendously quality product, and that's what their motto is. Like, they believe in doing, you know, a minimal amount of things, and that minimal amount of things is making great pizza. Their menu isn't tremendously deep and extensive because they like to do a small amount, and they like to do that to a perfect degree. And that's make great pizza, have a bunch of great sides. They're great people making great pizza. Check out One Pie Pizza. Their online menu and address and all that and ways to contact them are in the episode show notes, whether you're listening on a podcasting app or watching here on YouTube. So go into the episode show notes, find that stuff, get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Also, and Ron caught it. Yeah, I do love the rock, paper, scissors analogy. I think it's fantastic. I didn't want to go into it too much because I know people have heard it a lot, but I love it. And I'm going to keep saying it all off season because I think it applies here tremendously. One thing I wanted to mention as well, I say it every week, we love the interactivity and the engagement of these live shows and the live chat. So as we start to go through these position groupings, much like last week, we want to see your thoughts. We're going to start with defensive tackle in a minute. As we're talking, give us your priority rankings. Again, 5 means this has to be addressed. It's a top priority. 1 means, it's fine. We'll be okay. Leave it. Give us your priority rankings. Let us know why, who you're looking at, what's problematic, all that kind of stuff. We want to have that back and forth. I'll pull up comments and thoughts and all that stuff as we go. Aaron, we're going to start with you.
What up?
I spoiled it a little bit by saying defensive tackle. So we're going to start here with defensive tackle, a grouping that as of right now, as of this very moment, this recording on March 2nd, 2022 at 7:14 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the only defensive tackles on the Bills roster right now are Sarla Tulele, Ed Oliver, and that's a good joke. Like, I didn't even get to it. Yeah, Star, Ed, Eli Ankou, Elianku. I looked that up because that's Elianku. This is a super thin group. Hopefully Harrison Phillips comes back. What's the question mark with Starlet Tulele? There's all these questions around this grouping. Justin Zimmer, who looked well, and then he went down last year. This is a group that got thin fast in 2021. The effects were felt. Now moving into 2022, a lot of question marks around this grouping. What priority level are you giving it? And what are your thoughts as we move forward here in this offseason?
This one for me is a 4.5. I think this is as close as I'm getting. I think
I didn't know we got to do that.
Yes, you can go halvesies. You can also go quarters if you want to do a 4.25, a 4.3.
I almost give it a 4.8, but no, I'm going 4.5. I'm keeping it nice and round numbers here. Okay. We're going 4.5. Okay. And I think I don't think I gave anything a 4.5 last week.
No, 4 was your highest.
Yeah, this is it for me. This is, in my opinion, the biggest need for the Buffalo Bills this year, and I want to see it addressed in multiple ways. I think, to some of the points both you guys made when we started off this show, the Bills are primarily a nickel team, and they're going lighter. Taron Johnson's a smaller dude, right? Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds are being asked to do a lot of responsibility because the defensive line is also a little bit smaller, and they don't have those two gapping guys, and that's really difficult to have a true evaluation of Tremaine Edmonds, who we'll talk about, the linebackers, at some point tonight. So it's a weird evolution of the Sean McDermott defense, right? When he came in, they weren't primarily a nickel defense. That wasn't his thing in Carolina either. They had done the big nickel thing. Like everyone said, they were looking for that type of linebacker that could play that big nickel role, but they weren't a traditional nickel defense in the way the Bills are right now, with a small corner in Taron Johnson with little arms playing that nickel role. And so this has evolved over time now to where they're primarily this nickel deal. Like, this is what they're known for. They're not getting out of it. Bill Belichick spoke to that this year. Like, you're not getting them out of this base more times than not. And so in order to live in that world, and I think you put out some good stats this past week here, in order to live in that world, like, yeah, all these stats were great, how well they did overall as a defense. And I don't know that it's hard to pick on them even as well as they did throughout the season, but there's room to improve. And if you're going to live in that world, you need to address this position specifically. Ed Oliver's a stud, right? We know that he's probably the only defensive lineman going into 2022 that's going to get well over 50% of snaps. I'm guessing, he'll probably continue to rise his snap count. So we know he's a stud. Harrison Phillips, I'm assuming, is coming back. I could almost put it out there as a hot take that he's definitely coming back to the Buffalo Bills. I think he's a priority free agent. As soon as free agency or as soon as the season ended, I knew that they were going to be talking to his team, because he's the process, right? Like, might not be a player out there in free agency that represents what they're trying to build in a culture more than Harrison Phillips. And we saw the impact of him and Ed Oliver playing together as the year went on. They both got the best out of each other. It was the best unit along this defensive line when they were playing together. So bring those guys back. That's a priority for me. There's a big question mark with Starr, right? I don't know if any of us know what exactly is going to happen with him. Is he going to retire? Or are they going to just cut him outright? Like, what's going to happen with that deal? So there's a lot of unknown there. So for me, I'm addressing this multiple ways. I'm looking in free agency, because I know Brandon's going to try to address every single hole prior to the draft so that the board falls to him and he can play with what he wants. Luckily for the Bills, there's some fun guys that I think can fill some needs here in free agency, and some of the spots that they're probably needing the most this year. And defensive tackle, there's a bunch of dudes that I like here. Linval Joseph would be a dude that I think would fill that big body role for them, what they want. I think you could probably get him on a decent deal here towards the end of his career, chasing a Super Bowl ring. We keep talking about that with these older free agents, that you might be able to get a better deal on these guys for chasing a ring. I know Eric likes Daquan Jones quite a bit. Played for the Titans, then played for the Panthers. So there's some names out there.
Easy Bill, Panther connection. Rack them up.
So there's guys like that. And then obviously you had put out the tweet earlier about Jordan Davis.
Jordan Davis.
Yeah, there's a bunch of dudes in the draft. I'm sure Mathis will talk about some of these dudes in the draft that you can get in these first two rounds that you can bring in and be another big body. So I'm all for stacking this position. I think they need to bring in the cavalry here a little bit and really do almost what they did at the defensive edge position here last year and double dip, either whether it's through free agency and the draft or a couple picks in the draft. I don't care how you do it, but you got to get big bodies in here and you got to get a bit of a youth movement in there.
It's interesting that you mentioned the snap shares and snap percentage stuff. So the Bills were only one of 7 teams last year without a defensive lineman having over 60% of snaps. Ed Oliver was the highest at 57.8, but then Jerry Hughes was second, Gregory Rousseau was third, Mario Addison was fourth, Harrison Phillips was fifth at 44%. And then you had Starr at 29.4, Vernon Butler at 26.4. I'm just talking about defensive tackles. Yeah. So this was a thin group from a starting caliber and effective just overall snap percentage standpoint last year. And so I wanted to mention that because I thought that was very interesting. And I like where your head's at with 4.5.
Can I bring one? It's not my show, so I don't want to bring comments up. Can I pull a comment up?
Oh, you can do real quick. You want, sir.
We got Jordan Kawhi.
Yes.
Kawhi. Sorry if I probably definitely butchered that. Keem Hicks is someone you guys didn't mention. Still has something left in the tank. First of all,
maybe me or Steve were going to mention him. You don't know yet.
Yeah, maybe they were. But I want to say I love Akeem Hicks. He would absolutely be one of my favorites to get him on the Buffalo Bills team. I don't think that he will actually address the need that they have, which is like a true one tech defensive tackle.
He was more like 3-4 defensive end-ish.
Yeah, and he's great.
Yes, he is, but he does have that skill set and frame, so.
He has the body and size to do it, but I think you'd be overpaying for the type of skill that you're looking for, I think, by getting Akeem Hicks. And he would still be out of position a little bit. You want him rushing the passer more times than not, where what they need is a guy that can really two gap. You know what I mean? Like, and you don't need to pay Akeem Hicks rate. Maybe he would take a discounted rate again to come chase a Super Bowl, and then sure, maybe. But I think you can get better one techs for less price. But in a dream world, if we're playing Madden, I would love to add Akeem Hicks.
If we're playing Madden, I'm turning off fair trades, and I'm going to get Aaron Donald, and then I can fix the problem, and the episode's over. Steve, same question to you. Priority level for this defensive tackle grouping, and what are you doing this offseason to address it?
I mean, you could easily go like and say it's a level 3 or it's a level 4. All we got to do is re-sign Harrison Phillips, which would be fairly simple because I think everyone knows we want him back, and I think he wants to be back, and I think they can work out a pretty fair deal. And then after that, it's just sign a guy, just draft a guy. It's whatever. We can get by like we always get by, but I'm giving this a level 5.
Whoa, coming out hot.
DEFCON 5.
I love it.
Listen, if we hadn't swung and missed so many times at the position over the last 3 years, we might have already hoisted the Lombardi. I mean, if you look at the teams that have won the Super Bowl over the past couple of years, Vita Vea, Chris Jones, Aaron Donald, they all have that interior guy that just absolutely wreaks havoc on the opponent. And while the Buffalo Bills have done fairly adequately, Harrison Phillips, despite the injuries, finally came on. Ed Oliver, he's developing very nicely. They swung and they missed with Starr. They swung and they missed with Vernon. They swung and they missed with Quentin Jefferson, who had nothing but bad things to say on his way out about how they were using him at one tech. So the Buffalo Bills have clearly swung and missed at this position. If they can hit at this position, I think this is the position that can catapult their defense. You know, we've talked about these two gappers and stuff. Sean McDermott talks about how people want to come to Buffalo to become the best version of themselves. But right now, we're not putting the players or the scheme in front of Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, and Teron Johnson for them to be the best version of themselves. And we got to do that this offseason. Someone in the comments section mentioned it earlier. I want to re-sign Harrison Phillips. I want to sign another veteran, and I want to draft a guy. I want it to be Oliver Phillips, sign a free agent, and draft a guy. I don't know if I draft him round 1, but I would draft a guy, right? Okay. So if you bring Harrison Phillips back, that probably takes the Derek Notties, the Foley Fotakasis, the BJ Hills, the Sebastian Joseph Days off the table. But you guys already mentioned Daquan Jones, Linval Joseph. I know you're a big fan of Austin Johnson, Corey Peters, Tim Settle. I think there are some other guys in the mix in free agency that you can go and grab. And then depending on what else we do in free agency, I think there are guys in the first 3 or 4 rounds of the draft that you can go in and you can plug in with a veteran, Phillips and Oliver, who can be an immediate impact player. Obviously, Jordan Davis is talked about in the first round. Second round, you have Travis Jones. Third round, I think Fedarian Mathis comes into play. Fourth round, Matthew Butler, John Ridgway, Otita Ogbonia, Neil Farrell Jr., you got a Wuzurike in there as well. So you've got some pluggers at defensive tackle throughout the first 4 or 5 rounds of the draft. There's probably one in every round you can go and get. And if we get Phillips, if we get like say Daquan Jones, and then say we get Ed Oliver, those are your top 3. All of a sudden, some 3 techs come into play in the draft. Devontae Wyatt, Perion Winfrey, DeMarvin Leal. Later on in the draft, a guy like Thomas Booker, who Eric connected the dots back to our new assistant defensive line coach because he was sort of brought up by the Stanford defensive line coach who now coaches Thomas Booker. So you got that sort of connection there. So to me, I want a rookie, I want a free agent, I want Phillips back, and I want Ed Oliver. I want my cake and I want my cake and I want to eat it too, right? So I want it all. And I think that if you can redevelop and rechurn this position and make it a strength of this football team, it's going to make all the talented players around them on defense all that more better. And I think it could be the one position, as weird as it sounds, because they're sort of like not the most visible guys there when you're watching the game. That could be the position that catapults us over the top.
2 things. 1, I like what you said. I thought it was pretty spot on, and not just because I agree with it, but it was well said. 2, I love the amount of research that you put into it and the names you dropped, and there were a lot of sexy ones in that, especially from a draft perspective. I love what you did there. I think you are right on this position, defensive tackle, along with another on the back end. Spoiler, it's corner, which we'll talk about later. I think those are the 2 positions for me that I think if you add a different caliber of talent or skill set, it potentially unlocks things for other people. And just sitting here talking about defensive tackle, yeah, you hit it right on the head. Like it's not just about the defensive tackle position. It's not just about the defensive line grouping. It's about what it does for Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano and also Taron Johnson. And to connect to Aaron's point earlier, the Bills were in nickel 69% of the time in 2021, which has been pretty standard fare for them the last several years. They're usually somewhere around 70% in some way, shape, or form. I feel like they did it on purpose to get to that number so we could all appreciate 100%. It even more. 100%.
They're trying to lure Gronk in.
That's what they're trying to do. They know how to get it. He'd be like, yo, you saw what they played for nickel? I love it. I'll sign a deal now. That position grouping, right? It unlocks things for the rest of this defense. You've got suddenly a grouping that you add somebody with this different skill set, with a more two-gapping presence, who can lock up the A gaps, who can legitimately occupy blockers, stack and shed, and do all these things, and then keep Matt Milano free, Tremaine Edmonds free. And then again, because they're in nickel so much, Taron Johnson, it's a joke, a running joke amongst us, maybe others as well, but like Taron Johnson is like the third linebacker. He is, though. He plays the run like a beast. He is a dog around the line of scrimmage, and he has to fit the run legitimately because they run light boxes, 6 men or less in the box, 51% of the time. And then 30% of the time, they have 7-man boxes or less. So you're talking about 81% of the time, there's 7 or less guys in the box. And then you add up on top of that, right, the lightness in terms of weight of everybody up front. Ed Oliver is 287 pounds. Harrison Phillips, if he comes back, I like him. He's 307. Starlet Tulele was your like big effective space eater, really.
He's like 315, right?
Exactly. He lost weight and got more efficient. And Vernon Butler was there around like 330, but he was ineffective because of overall play.
He's not that good.
Fair. And this is a group that if you unlock this defense via one of these two positions, corner, which we're going to talk about later, and defensive tackle for me, I think it's not just about that one position. It's not just about defensive tackle. It makes everyone else's job a little easier. It makes their responsibilities a little different. I think that's huge for this defense. And then you just have the added benefit of, okay, cool. When you play teams like the Colts who want to run right at you and run it down your throat, do you have a guy who can potentially deter that a little bit? I think that's huge for this defense. It adds another, like I mentioned earlier, like Ron commented the rock, paper, scissors, it adds another layer and another level to that. It allows you to continue to mix and match and play against teams in a variety of ways. And I love the idea, based on who's available in free agency, I love the idea of adding one of these quote unquote cheaper guys in the free agent market, bring someone in. I'm a huge fan of the idea of going with Jordan Davis in the first round or Devontae Wyatt. I love Davis, the Wyatt option. The other names you mentioned, the Travis Joneses of the world, the Darian Mathises of the world. But what you also mentioned, because there's like one per round, I'm scared that if you go in thinking like, okay, we can kind of nail one of these guys, if one of them gets taken, your whole plan changes. I want this addressed in free agency, so that way when you go into the draft, it's not a glaring need. But if you're sitting there in the second round or third round and Travis Jones is sitting there, or I don't even care, I'm making it up, but Perion Winfrey somehow slips and you're like, okay, you know what? Let's take this guy and let's take advantage of it. And it's not a huge need because of what they did in free agency. Give me that free agent addition. Then if a BPA falls and that BPA happens to be a defensive tackle, cool, whatever. But this for me, I flirted back and forth between a 4.5 and a 4.75. I considered ratcheting it up a little bit. I tried to split it and I went with 4.62. So I cheated, but it's up there for me. I am 1,000%.
You're just showing off your fancy math.
Yeah, I can do math. I teach math. I got a PhD. You know who else has a PhD? Somebody who was late to the show, but
we're just getting started, right? What are you talking about?
We just started. We just went live a couple seconds ago.
He was going through his coats. He had to pick out the right coat
decide.
for the show.
He was sitting in that. It's easy to get lost in that closet with all those coats. He couldn't decide. Mr. Anthony Romeo from the Hoof, thank you very much for joining us. And as I would guess you have surmise, since you've been in the green room for a little bit here, we're talking about defensive tackle. This is the first grouping we started with, so you haven't missed too much. But same as last week, you know the drill. Scale of 1 to 5, 1 being we're fine, 5 being red alert, everything's terrible. Where does defensive tackle rank for you as a priority need, and how do you want to address it?
Well, I heard your mathematical precision there on the position.
We're all pretty smart here. Just wanted to flex those muscles a little.
But, I was definitely at like 4.5 on this one, if not higher, for sure, because it's, just in a pure bodies standpoint, right? I talked on your show both times I've been on. By the way, where's my royalties check? It's coming in the mail, right? For this show, I'm already in the line halfway anyway.
I'm paying
right?
you
It's
in
Anthony.
Dogecoin.
Yeah, I have lost faith in Starr. I don't trust him at all. So to me, there is no trustworthy defensive tackle currently that we have healthy on the roster that can go out there and play a good amount of snaps. So, it's definitely a position of need. I'm sure you guys all covered that while I was gone, but for me, it's panic mode, and it's fill this much high need of the team. And I know that you are pretty high, Anthony, on defensive tackle in the draft this year, and a couple guys you really like. And I agree that the approach has to be to a combination of signing a guy in free agency, whoever it may be. Hopefully that guy starts with Harrison Phillips and moves from there. And then, Starr to me is, I don't want him on the team anymore. I'm that over him at this point. So I just don't think he's useful anymore. He's not reliable. I don't care if it's 1 million we save and 4 million we lose. I just want him gone, and draft somebody to come in. You can't rely on a drafted player to play a majority of snaps, especially on this defensive line. We've seen that they don't tend to want to do that. Even if it was a first round pick, who knows? Maybe they would give that person more. But in that case, then you put more of a priority on re-signing a Harrison Phillips so that you can, have some flexibility there and play with the position a little bit. And you have to draft. You got to find free agents you like, whether that's bargain bin because we've chose to invest in other positions, or making this your number one priority and signing a guy at this position, spending whatever it takes, 8 to 10 million a year on a defensive tackle who hopefully works out better than the ones you've chosen before. I heard Aaron allude to that earlier as well. So
yeah, it's definitely a grouping that I think, the fact that our priority rankings in terms of the number is all pretty much in that same boat and pretty close in a ballpark area. Like, it's highlighted the need for this. And again, even just from a roster standpoint, we got Starr, we got Ed, we got Ilianku. Even if Harrison Phillips comes back, cool. Like, you don't have a deep group and you don't have a top heavy group. Like, you're kind of just sitting there in a position that is tremendously important given the scheme and the roster and personnel makeup of this defense. So it is pretty dire, and our numbers and grades reflect that. Mr. Mathis, you get to lead off this second position grouping. We're staying on the defensive line. We're looking at edge here. Scale 1 to 5. What do you got, and what do you want to do?
I mean, I put this as a level 3, and mostly it's just because the two UFAs that we got, Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison. To me, you really just want to add one stable vet. I mean, if you're looking at the roster, Gregory Rousseau is probably going to be starting length and strength left end next year. You got Boogie Basham, who's probably going to continue to rotate between sort of that 3 tech and on the edge. And you got AJ Epinesa, who's really going to have to step up his game. Of Hughes and Addison, I'd like one of them back. But I use this analogy on the Air Raid Hour all the time. It's like Mark Wahlberg and the other guys. It's I'm Peacock Captain, you got to let me fly. We got to let these young guys fly, right? So to me, bring back one vet to make it a 4-man rotation and give Rousseau, Bash, and Epinesa their chance to spread their wings and fly. See if they, sink or swim, see if they truly got it. I think when you look out in free agency and you look at the draft, I would love to draft a guy again because I really like some of the pass rushers in this draft class. But I mean, at the end of the day, when you look at it, there's no, you could throw money at Chandler Jones. You could throw money at Emmanuel Agba. But I think we pretty much well talked about how if you improve the defensive tackle position, the secondary gets better, and then maybe the pressures turn into sacks, right? So I would just love to get Jerry Hughes back on a 1-year, $6 million deal. I think worst case scenario, Mario Addison on a 1-year, $4 million deal. I'm looking at guys sort of equivalent to Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison. I'm not saying they're the same, but sort of those veterans who you might be able to get a little bit cheaper. Melvin Ingram might be the priciest of the bunch because he was with Kansas City. Justin Houston, not so much pass rush pop anymore. Jason Pierre-Paul, you're hoping he can stay healthy. Dante Fowler, right? Shaq Lawson. These are the guys you're talking about in free agency if you can't go out and get the studs. Obviously, if something magically happens where the Minnesota Vikings want to trade you like Danielle Hunter for a 2nd-round pick, you might want to jump on that. But you really can't count on that heading into the offseason. So to me, Jerry Hughes, after Harrison Phillips, is the second free agent, probably after Ryan Bates, who's an RFA that I want back on this football team. I had to power rank free agents. It's Harrison Phillips, Ryan Bates, and then Jerry Hughes. Jerry Hughes is number 3, just because I think you want that veteran in the room. And like I said, if the defensive tackles get better, the corners play better, Jerry Hughes might be able to convert some of those pressures to sacks.
I like it. I like where your head's at. I think that's another position that, again, it addresses that position need, but also potentially unlocks some things for other position groupings, other players, the defense as a whole. Mr. Romeo, same question to you. Priority rank this edge grouping.
Well, I think Steve nailed it on this one. I was also at a 3 for this position. You have to add a body. That's without a doubt. You can't go. You have 3 young guys on the roster. It is time to let them play. You have to prove it. Is Epinesa going to be the guy we thought he would be, drafting him in the second round? You spent the first 2 last year on him. You've got to let this position develop into what you think it's going to be at this point. I think edge is now the position where I would be probably shocked at this point if we spent a significant investment of free agency money of the salary cap on this position, because there's so many other positions of need. And at this point, the core has to be the guys you brought in, and you have to see what they can do. I also agree that the veteran route is the way to go. I think if anything, you could bring in 2 veterans if the price is right. If you're able to cap save, maybe you can bring Hughes back on a $4 million deal, and that allows you to sign another guy off the edge, whoever that free agent might be. Yes, Ingram is one who I wanted to sign last year so bad, was pounding the table for him all off season, and he had a really good year. Addison, I actually think, because he had, statistically the best year of the edge players on our team, he could probably get a little more out of free agency and might be asking for a little more, because he has that leverage now that he probably isn't going to ever have again. Meaning, okay, let's be realistic, maybe 2-3 years. So I don't expect him to be the one that's back unless Hughes has clearly made the decision, I want to play back closer to home in Texas. I'm leaving, it's been great, Buffalo, but peace out. I'm finishing my career elsewhere. Then maybe you make a priority to sign a guy like Addison. I really want it to be Hughes, though, because Hughes is without a doubt the leader at the position in that room. He's been there mentoring these young 3 since they've been there. They've used him as an example. The teams that prepare for the Buffalo Bills and think about the defense still think about Jerry Hughes. The impact he has cannot be overstated at this point. I think with the pressures and all of that, yes, everybody wants to talk about his sack production isn't there. He is so much more than a sack number on this team and to this clubhouse, both off on the bench and in the locker room and on the field, that if we were to have the 2021 season, for example, and plug in average Joe edge instead of Jerry Hughes, I think Bills fans would appreciate Jerry Hughes a hell of a lot more where he's at now in his career, not like in his prime or anything, but toward the end, and still being this productive and this important of a player on the defense. So he's really the priority for me. And then I would love to see another veteran signed and, let the young 3 go. And that way you have some protection, you have some mentorship, and whichever of the 2 really catches on best, you let those 2 start getting the higher percentage of the snaps, and the other person comes in as a rotation.
Okay,
more of a rotation.
Aaron.
They rotate enough. Everything's rotation on this.
Do you think if we re-signed Gary Hughes instead of Jerry Hughes, people would be less upset?
Right.
He's a worse player, though.
Bring back Rick Bates and Gary Hughes.
Yeah, Gary Hughes can probably be had for like $500,000 a year.
He grows a mustache.
Larry Hughes, Barry Hughes. I mean,
Terry Hughes. His
just
his
grows a
brother's
mustache.
Yeah, it just changes, like Bobby Valentine with the fake glasses and mustache when he got thrown out with the Mets all those years ago. So, all right, so 3s from both of you guys.
Yeah,
I'm very interested. I'll keep my thought to myself for now. Aaron.
Oh, you guys know where this is going. So I'm happy that this podcast turned into a Jerry Hughes appreciation podcast, and we're going to take over from here of just appreciating Jerry Hughes, because I've all of a sudden become a Jerry Hughes stan somehow. And I've always liked Jerry, so it's nothing new, but this defense of him that I've had to create here on Twitter this year is actually blowing my mind a little bit, how angry people are at Jerry Hughes and
we didn't get sacks.
The way they view this position. Yeah. So let's talk about it for a second. So I will let you know right away. I'm pretty close to you guys. I had it at 3.5.
Okay.
Just because Greg said this a lot about Dawson Knox last year when I was pounding the table that he was tight end one. Hope is not a plan, he kept telling me, right? And so hoping that AJ Epinesa develops, hoping that Groot takes that next step. I do think that's probably a good case that he's going to continue to develop, hoping that Boogie Basham becomes the player that we draft him to be. Like, that's a lot you're putting on a young group of players. And so not having that veteran presence like Anthony just talked about, I do want to add two. I would like to add two, and maybe you don't bring both of them on to the final 53. Maybe it's a Jerry Hughes and a Shaq Lawson. We had heard rumors Shaq wanted to rejoin the team, but the deal didn't get done during the playoffs. Maybe bring him on to compete with AJ Epinesa to get something coming out of AJ, and whoever wins that job in the summer will get that spot, but maybe you move on from Shaq, but be it by then. But I want, at least in camp, somebody to challenge and not be relying that AJ is going to take a step that we haven't seen him be able to do quite yet. But
F.A. Obata, maybe.
F.A. Obata is another one I would love to see.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Same thing. I think like he and Shaq are kind of the same to me, but yeah, I would be happy for that. But let's get some Jerry Hughes praise in here. So Jerry Hughes is among defensive ends with 50% of snaps. So that's 50% of 646 snaps. At 33 years old, he ranked 14th in PFF's PRP, which combines sacks, hits, hurries relative of how much you pressure a quarterback on pass snaps. 9th in win percentage, 10th in quarterback hurries, 18th in total pressures, while being 37th in total true pass snaps. So we talked about how often the Bills line was being used. When you talk about some of these other guys, these TJ Watts of the world, some of the guys that the big names, Chandler Joneses, and these people that everyone wants in free agency, their snap percentage is much higher. He was on in the same snap areas of Brian Burns and had similar type of productivity, just not the sacks, right? The sacks didn't get home in the same way. And pressures do matter, guys. Like, I know that it sounds weird because we want to look at stats and or at the box score and just show that sacks matter. But here's the splits between QBs. And again, this is quarterbacks of 50% or more of 276 snaps. So this is 30 NFL quarterbacks this last year. When kept clean, their dropback percentage was 76% of dropbacks. They were kept clean. Their completion percentage is 71.14. Under pressure, it drops 48.8. That's a 22% drop in completion percentage when under pressure. Their NFL passer rating when kept clean was 100. NFL passer rating when under pressure dropped to 69.11%. That's a 30.89% drop in NFL passer rating. Like, these things are substantial in a game that's a game of inches, and a game that, you know, every small detail makes it changes things. You're not going to sack a quarterback most times. Even the TJ Watts of the world, when they're how many times they rush the passer, you're looking at like 10 to 15% of those snaps end in a sack. That's still a rare occurrence on a pass rush snap. And that's a guy that's probably rushing the passer more than anyone else in the NFL, right? So when you're a Jerry Hughes and you're only rushing 300 snaps a year, you're not going to get double digit sacks. Like, that is just not going to happen. There's been a couple of them. Jadeveon Clowney was around that 300 snap mark and he got double digit sacks. But then you got to look at the context of those sacks too. Like, Jerry Hughes was close and other guys didn't clean up some of those sacks. But ultimately, like we said earlier about this defense, they were still the top 10 defense in sacks for the year. And they were 7th in adjusted pass rush percent and adjusted sack percentage. So it's not all bad like fans want to say. They got to the quarterback, they affected the quarterback. They were the number one pass defense in DVOA. Like, they were doing a good job impacting quarterback play. And this is a number one pass defense without Tre'Davious White from week 12 and beyond. Like, they weren't the best covered unit at times behind, you know, with Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson. So the defensive line was doing their job. Even in that Kansas City game, they got more pressure on Patrick Mahomes than the Cincinnati Bengals did. They didn't get as many sacks, but they got a lot more pressures. Mahomes was just in God mode, and he escaped everything. He was running for his life all day.
He did what we praised Josh Allen for with his magician ability in the pocket.
Yeah. So it keeps coming back when I'm looking at this free agency list, because I don't want to spend a lot more picks on it. We have a lot of youth at this position. So I agree with Mathis that there's some guys that I'd love to add to this team, but I don't want to use those assets to add to this room. So when I'm looking at free agency, though, I do keep coming back to Jerry Hughes, because they're not going to spend the big money on a Chandler Jones. Some of these younger guys that are going to get big money, Jerry, at least for now at age 33, is playing at just a productive level. Maybe he hits a wall this year and he can't be that productive, but when you match him up, he's just as productive as most of these other guys, and he's probably going to give you a good deal. And you could give him a fairly easy deal and give him some hard to reach incentives where if he does hit a bunch of sacks, then you pay him and everybody's happy anyway. So I'd love to bring him back. There's some other names out there though. If Jerry decides to retire, maybe this conversation's moot because he doesn't want to play anymore and he's done. And so there's some other names out there, but yeah, no, I'm pounding the table to get Jerry back. I agree with Judge that he's one of my top priorities to get back on this team and run it back.
Some numbers, some other ones that Aaron, that you didn't point out. I tweeted this out earlier today. And I just brought up two guys. So, Max Crosby led the NFL in pressures this past year with 108. So he had 108 pressures on 626 pass rush snaps, which was the third most. That's a pressure rate of 17.3%. Okay, so 17.3% pressure rate for him.
Remember that.
Remember that. TJ Watt, 23 sacks, led the NFL. 67 pressures. Oh, I want to mention pressures are, this is according to PFF, pressures are sacks plus hits plus hurries, right? So sacks are included in those pressure numbers. So TJ Watt, 67 pressures on 449 pass rush snaps, a pressure rate of 14.9%. Okay. Jerry Hughes, 55 pressures, which was 18th overall. 395 pass rush snaps, which was 46th, for a pressure rate of 13.9%. So his pressure rate is 13.9. TJ Watts is 14.9, 1 percentage point. And then Max Crosby is at 17.3, less than 4 percentage points up. He didn't have this terribly unproductive year. Yes, sacks are tremendous, but this is the thought that I had and that Bruce Nolan had as well, that I didn't even know he said, and we kind of said like the similar thing on Twitter. Sacks are just one potential negative outcome of a pressure. Incompletion is one. Throwaway is one. Interception is one. A check down to a guy who gets tackled for a 1 yard loss or a 1 yard gain is one. There are a multitude of negative outcomes for the offense if you get pressures. Yes, sacks are tremendous.
And sacks are the most rare of those outcomes.
True. Yes, just off of the numbers perspective, what's more likely to happen? One thing happening or one of the other 5 things from happening? You're playing the odds, you're playing the field there. I would love for a guy who always just, oh, cool, he's going to beat his man and get a sack. That would be tremendous. It doesn't happen a ton, even for the best in the league.
So you're saying we can't trade for Myles Garrett?
No, I'm saying we can. I think if you offer him Feliciano at 7th, you get it done.
Yeah, 7.
So
6.5.
Some perspective for Jerry Hughes. Oh, also, I ran the numbers for Emmanuel Ogbah. He only had 6 more pressures, and he had maybe like 250 more pass rush snaps than Jerry Hughes. His pressure rate was like 11.6 or 11.3, so a couple percentage points lower than Jerry. Not terrible, but not tremendously better. My overall thought with this grouping, though, I'm a little higher than you guys. I'm at like a 4.2 for edge. And here's my reason why. I know the hope is a plan thing. Aaron, I thought that was a good analogy with it was for Dawson Knox. My issue with it is with this group, you have, for me, there is no answer at edge right now. There's no known quantity other than Gregory Rousseau in the run game. His run stop win rate, he was 5th amongst all edge players, which is tremendous. I don't think any of us saw his strength in the run game flashing this early on in his career, but his pass rush productivity is not yet there, which again is completely fair. Dude has played defensive end in college and the NFL for a combined 2 years. He's like 4 years away from being a safety and a wide receiver in football. He's tremendously green and young in terms of both experience and just overall age. He's still adjusting. AJ Epinesa, I thought he would take a jump last year. He only saw 30.6% of the snaps. It would be awesome if he took a jump, but again, that's an if. Carlos Basham, 18.6% of snaps last year. I think what we saw last year from Carlos Basham is kind of what he is. I think he can get a little better, but I don't think he's ever going to be this big return on investment guy. I think he was close to what his ceiling was when he was drafted by this Bills team. Granted, he could get better, but even if you just go with that, those are your 3 edge rushers that are the main. And then you also have Mike Love on the grouping right now. So your edge rushing group right now, Mike Love's a dude. You got Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Carlos Basham, Mike Love. I think it's a lot of question marks. Even Rousseau, we're still going to have a question mark. What does he offer from the pass rush productivity standpoint? I think there's a big possibility, maybe not big, but there's a legitimate possibility that you see another year from Gregory Rousseau where he doesn't connect all the dots with pass rush. Maybe that's a year 3 thing. Maybe that's a year 4 thing, which is something that Bean talked about last offseason. Drafting Gregory Rousseau was a move for the future type of thing, right? He just happened to excel and then ended up being a starting guy, but the pass rush game still isn't there. I think we don't have any proven production overall other than Gregory Rousseau in the run game, but especially from a pass rush perspective, Jerry Hughes led the Bills last year with 55 pressures. Mario Addison was third with 38. They were 26% of the Bills' total pressures. And again, if you look at the snap percentages, Ed Oliver, 57.8, Jerry Hughes, 51.8, Groot, 49.3, Mario Addison, 44.7, Harrison Phillips at 44, and then AJ Epinesa at 30.6. I don't know if, I'm not saying it can't happen. I think that's a lot to put on the plate of Basham and Epinesa. And so the reason it's a 4.2 for me, I'll say 4.25 to make it a nice roundish kind of number. I think this position has to be addressed, and I think it will, whether it's Jerry coming back, whether it's Mario Addison, whether it's some sort of, again, I don't want to use this as with it because I think it has a negative connotation, but some kind of bargain free agent type. I don't think Chandler Jones is coming. Hassan Reddick's not coming. Like, I don't think that is, I've seen people throw those names around. I don't think that's happening unless Jermaine Johnson or Ajabo fall at 25. I'm trying to think of guys who realistically, from an edge rush perspective, could fall to 25.
Bean gets the itch and trades for Daniel Hunter.
Yeah, maybe. Like, I don't think
That's the big name.
I don't think you're getting like some kind of stud prospect in the first round. And I don't think you're getting a stud guy at edge. I think you got to piecemeal it together, but it needs to be addressed in a multitude of fashions because I have questions about this group. I don't have faith rolling out and just putting our eggs in the Groot, Epinesa, Basham back. And I would like to, but I'm not there. So it's over.
How about what if we took Tremaine Edmonds?
Oh, well, yeah.
Put him at edge.
Listen, I don't know if you guys know, right? He had 10 sacks in college, and he's got long arms, and he's big. So even
he's a terrible middle linebacker. So
he's awful. And even though he hasn't lined up at edge really ever, including college, and even though he doesn't have pass rush moves or pass rush plan,
he's not
technique.
bendy.
No,
but I think it could work.
But put him at edge, and we're good to go. And then we don't have to worry about.
Here's an idea: if all of the offensive linemen are blocking the other guys, and there's a big hole for him to run through, sack every time.
There you go.
Every time.
There you go. Yeah, I guess I'm a little higher than everyone. I was wondering where everybody would fall on this one. I guess maybe it's still, I think we all have the same idea.
The fun of the exercise, right?
That is the fun of the exercise. I think we're all in agreement, though, in terms of this position group needs to be addressed in a multitude of ways. It's just a matter of, and we're all in pretty much agreement on how it gets addressed. It's just a matter of, I guess, the priority level we assign to it. But I think that's fair. And again, part of the exercise. We talked about, go ahead. Anybody?
There are some guys who get cut too, like a Frank Clark could get cut. Obviously, he's on the downside of his career. So, I mean, that's one of the crazy things. And we talked a little bit about in the air raid hour. Like we're mentioning all these names now, and it's like, wow, this isn't the sexiest name. But snap of a finger, somebody can get released, and all of a sudden that player could be a difference maker for our football team. So it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out.
I think about that with Steve Smith and the Ravens all the time. Like he gets cut by Carolina and then becomes like, oh, well, what is he going to be? And then he's like wide receiver 1 and has a really good couple of years with the Ravens. It kind of has a really strong end to his career there. And yeah, you see that with dudes all the time. And again, what's a nice bonus piece, you guys have all mentioned it at some point already in this episode, dudes who get cut like that and are free agents, whether it's early in the offseason or late, they want to go to a team like, okay, well, I want to go somewhere where I can win. Well, you know what? I'll go play with Josh Allen and this cool Bills team and see what they got going on there. And everybody talks about, Ed Oliver's talking about in interviews about the culture and what McDermott did for him. And Jerry Hughes talks about it. And all this seems like a cool place. And I like snow, so I'm going to go to Buffalo. You never know. Moving on to our next position grouping, we talked about Tremaine Edmonds. So I guess we don't really need to talk about linebackers. We'll just say move Edmonds to edge and we're good to go. Start Andre Smith. But Mr. Romeo, we're going to lead off with you here. Linebacker, what are your thoughts on this position grouping?
I am at a 2 on the linebacker group, and here's why. We have the starting 2 who play the overwhelming majority of the snaps in Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds, and as far as we know, those 2 guys are penciled in. Now, I did say on our free agent special show or salary cap special show that the biggest question I think the Bills have in this offseason is the value they place on Tremaine Edmunds. Now, the value he brings to the team is unquestioned. You know, I don't understand any of the Edmunds hate out there. I really don't. Maybe because he was a first-round pick early on. Okay, yeah, you can say he's not one of the top 3 linebackers, top 5 linebackers for where he was picked. But the value he brings to this team is unquestioned. And, you know, the number of people who just hate him and think that he's garbage and we should ship him out is ridiculous.
Everything is his fault.
Completely unfounded. I mean, he calls the defense. He leads that team. We know, we've heard for years, yes, he's super young and he could play for 10 more years. And he's not worth, nobody right now is saying we're going to pay him $25 million a year if we choose to extend him. But I say that he's the number one priority for the Bills is determining his value, because teams are going to call you on Tremaine Edmunds this year. They're going to say, hey, Buffalo, what if we gave you a 2nd round pick and a viable middle linebacker? Maybe. No. How about a late 1st round pick and a replacement middle linebacker? Maybe not starter, but you know, what is that tempting enough? No. How about a 1st round pick this year, late, and a 3rd round pick next year? You know, whatever the value is, they have to determine it, because they are going to get calls. And they also have to determine, okay, if this is the guy we want, what are we willing to put on the table right now? And a lot of that depends on where Edmunds is at. Do I want to stay with this team long term, or do I want to use this 1 year, this 5th year option to determine my own value and push it up if I can when I enter free agency next year? I believe the Bills are going to offer him something in terms of an extension. I firmly believe Beane and McDermott have had that conversation and they're thinking to themselves, okay, we want to get him now. So what is our number? 4 years, whatever it is, average annual value of 15, 16, 17 million. Middle linebacker, that's not top of the pack. That's not, you're the best middle linebacker there is. And I think that's where the perception is for the haters out there. But his value
everybody's
is
afraid he's going to get like Fred Warner or Darius Leonard.
Exactly.
No, he's going to get.
No, he's not anywhere near that value. Now, if he comes out, has an explosive year, then guess what? He's walking next year for free because we can't pay him. And then all those people who were haters are going to hate themselves for thinking that way. But the things he does for this defense, can he improve? Absolutely. But that's part of the potential side of things that Beane and McDermott are thinking. He's still young and still has improvement to be made. He's not playing at his peak yet. So if we can get him for a bargain now, I think they try to do it this offseason. Then you have on the other side, probably my favorite Buffalo Bills player over the last few years in Matt Milano, who I'm so glad they managed to keep last season. Because, again, talk about what he does and his consistency. It's clearly there. He's a coverage master, really. That's what he does. He chose to stay in Buffalo for probably less than what he could have got on the regular free agent market. And he's just an all-around team guy. Matt Milano plays defense good. Matt Milano out, defense bad. I boiled it down to that for years for people because they did not understand the value that Matt Milano brought to this team. And it was that simple for a long time. And still to this day, a lot of our defense depends on Matt Milano playing his position and doing it well. So those two guys are aces in the hole. I think they have to be out there. Where the question comes, why I have it at a 2, is you do have to address who's that third guy, right? Right now it's Klein. We know his contract is not favorable. They probably will have to cut him or negotiate down and say, okay, we'll give you this much if you take the pay cut and you're willing to, or you can test free agency and goodbye. And if that happens, the reason I still have it at a 2 is there are young guys on the roster who could step in, who could take that next step and become that third linebacker. Will they be as dependable as AJ Klein became? Maybe not, but if they take that next step and they're able to prove themselves, they become a hell of a bargain as the third linebacker in AJ Klein's place. The other, if we're talking linebackers, technically we have a lot of other guys, special teams guys who are labeled linebackers as well, but none of, specifically Matakevich in this case, who is probably not going to see any snaps at linebacker anytime soon. He's not going to end up being that third guy, but we have potentials to fill that third linebacker role in-house, which is exciting. But Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmunds are one of the best linebacker tandems in the NFL, I would argue, in terms of what they do and how they complement each other, and especially in Sean McDermott's defense, where he relies on those guys to do what they do and to build around that.
Very true. And yeah, they bear a tremendous burden in this Sean McDermott defense, this nickel defense. Aaron, swing it up to you.
What up?
Linebackers, are they dope? Are they not dope? What are your thoughts, dog?
They're so dope.
That's it. So dope. I'm done.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't have a ton to say about this, so I'll keep mine quick here. I have it at a 2 just because I didn't want to say a 1. Like I'm pretty good at linebacker, to be honest. And I actually I'm on team extend Tremaine Edmonds now. I'm ready to make an extension now and get it done with. I love this linebacking core. I really do, for what they're asked to do in this defense. We talked about it earlier. They have linebackers 2-gapping. Like that's not on the line.
That's hard as hell.
That's on the staff. That's on the lack of guys in front of them. So fix that. Get that fixed. And I think that you have pretty good linebackers. Kendall Mursky, one of our members here at Cover One, did a great breakdown of where these guys are, both Milano and Edmonds, in relation to their peers. These guys that we talk about, these Darius Leonards, these Fred Warners, Bobby Wagner's of the world. I urge everyone to go search Kendall Mursky's handle and just type in Edmonds. You'll see I've been posting it on everyone that's talking trash about Tremaine Edmonds. I've been posting it in those replies because he did a great job of presenting where these guys are relative to their peers. And I think that's the big conversation when we talk to Bills fans, when we're talking amongst ourselves, is, you know, it's easy to say, to point out 1 or 2 plays where, you know, Tremaine Edmonds misses a tackle or he's chasing somebody from behind and say, well, it's Tremaine Edmonds' fault. Like, or there's a catch that happens and Tremaine happens to be the closest guy to him. And everyone says, oh, that's Tremaine Edmonds' fault, because we don't know what the assignment was. We don't know where he was supposed to be, what he was supposed to be doing, but we don't compare it to peers. Eric Turner has a bunch of film out there on his Twitter handle showing Fred Warner also making the same mistakes as Tremaine Edmonds.
And Devin White.
And Devin White making these similar type mistakes. It's hard to play linebacker in the NFL. Like teams are scheming up ways to put you in pressure situations where you either have to come up and make a play or stay in coverage and make a play.
You're in constant conflict.
Constant conflict. It's a split-second decision. And no matter what decision you make, it's going to be the wrong decision if it's a good enough quarterback. Like that's what they're trying to do to you. That is what they're accomplishing. And so it's very difficult to play. He's a team captain. Like that matters in Buffalo, right? Mm-hmm. Like they've made him a team captain at a young age. He's a leadership part of this team. I absolutely think that he's a priority for them to keep around here in Buffalo and extend and keep things going forward. So I'm good with the starters. I guess the 2 would be, to Anthony's point, like what it was behind there is Dotson, who they brought back. Is he going to be the next Klein? Is Klein going to try to find some money and then come back on a cheaper deal this offseason? I'd be happy with something like that. But in terms of the starters, I'm good to go. Let's get Edmonds locked up for a few years here and let's roll with what we've got.
Well, I like it. I like the first 2 answers and where your head's at. Mr. Mathis. Trade Tremaine Edmonds or move him to edge? Pick one. I'm just kidding.
I mean, I honestly, I made this point on the salary cap show. The only way I'd be willing to part with Tremaine Edmonds is honestly every pick after 15, you call the team Tremaine Edmonds for your pick straight up. And if they're willing to say yes, and Devin Lloyd or Nakobe Dean are on the board, you take them.
I love the idea of calling every team. They're like, straight up, no, goodbye.
Straight up,
hey, straight up, no, goodbye.
That's what I would do. I would, and that's only if the Buffalo Bills have made the decision to move on. But what did Brandon Beane say? Like, oh, I heard the chatter about Tremaine Edmonds, right from Joe Basaglia. Brandon Beane says he knows Tremaine Edmonds is a lightning rod for criticism, but those that criticize Edmund, Beane says, I'm not in that camp. So from a monetary standpoint, I would like to, maybe you could trade Tremaine Edmonds straight up for a draft pick, and if Nakobe Dean or Devin Lloyd is on the board, you save yourself a ton of money. You get a rookie contract for 2 linebackers that I wholeheartly believe in, and you still have your other first round pick to utilize. So like that's something you look at from the outside looking in, but also the Buffalo Bills are never going to do that. So like, what does it matter? So why are we even having that conversation? Mostly just because I like hearing myself talk, I think.
Plus Nakobe Dean and Devin Lloyd are fun. Like that's fair.
I want an excuse to talk about them because they're good. But AJ Klein is the thing that sticks out like a sore thumb, right? Like I would like for him to take a pay cut. Like if you cut AJ Klein, you know, he's walking away with $700,000 a year and you're saving millions of dollars. Is somebody paying AJ Klein $6 million like he would be getting with the Buffalo? No, they're not. So if you can get AJ Klein to come down to like 2.5, 3, you're probably going to end up keeping AJ Klein. I disagree with it, but I think that's probably more the route that Brandon Beane's going to take. But I look at the depth of the linebackers in this draft and I gave it a 2. By the way, I gave it a level 2 here. Cool. And that's just because until Tremaine Edmonds does sign that extension, I do need the Buffalo Bills to hedge their bets. So starting in the third round, I've seen the name Chad Muma mentioned a couple of times. I think he's more of a first or second round pick, but
some people have him as linebacker 1 ahead of
Yeah.
Dean and ahead of Lloyd.
Yeah, I think those people are nuts. But if he's sitting there in the third round, Chad Muma, Brian Asamoah from Oklahoma, Darren Beavers from Cincinnati, Damone Clark from LSU, Troy Anderson. There are some dudes, Channing Tindall. I love Channing Tindall, JoJo Doman. Matt Milano
from
Jr.,
Nebraska,
JoJo Doman.
JoJo. Yeah.
There are some dudes where if they're sitting there in the third or the fourth round and these guys are available, you consider pulling the trigger to hedge your bets because I can see these guys as a fit. The last guy I want to throw out there, I think injuries are going to move him down. You could probably have him in the 5th or the 6th round, which I think is going to be an absolute steal. Terrell Bernard from Baylor. We know that the relationship that Sean McDermott and Dave Aranda have. Terrell Bernard's been playing really good weak side linebacker for that Baylor football team for quite a long time, but injuries have always been his MO. He's a guy who you might be able to have late in this draft that could be an absolute steal. Terrell Bernard comes in and is your LB3 right away. I mean, he's better than Tyrell Dodson. He's better than Andre Smith. He's better than Joe Giles-Harris. And he could give a guy like AJ Klein a run for his money. So there are some dudes out there that I think are really good in the middle rounds of the draft. And I would, depending on what you do with your draft capital, depending on what you do in free agency, what holes you fill, I would take one of those guys just to hedge your bets until Matt Milano or until Tremaine Edmonds ends that extension.
You said Baylor defense, and I know he's not a linebacker, but I immediately thought of Jalen Petrie, and I was just like, oh, like that would be like, I just keep thinking of his tape. I'm in a similar boat. I don't want to go with it too much. I think we're all in pretty much similar thought processes here. I went with a 2.5 just because I'm concerned about the depth behind Milano and Edmonds. If God forbid something that happens to one of them, how do we feel in 2022? And then again, going forward, I think that's like a concern for me as well. Looking at this group now, so right now under contract, Matt Milano, Tremaine Edmonds, AJ Klein, Tyler Matakevich, Andre Smith, Tyrell Dodson, and Joe Giles-Harris. I think there's a very real possibility Klein is gone, like we talked about. Maybe even Matakevich is gone. I would like both of them to stay under pay cut scenarios. I think Klein most likely goes bye-bye, depending on what goes down. And I see your message in the chat, Aaron. You're good to go. I appreciate you. I think it's an interesting grouping behind the two of them. And then as far as Milano and Edmonds, it's really hard to be a linebacker in a nickel scheme, especially in this defense without a two-gapping defensive tackle in front of you, with a lighter defensive line grouping in front of you, with light boxes, with having to be responsible in pass coverage and also in the run to have to be part of this bend but don't break defense. And I said it last night in the film room. I just encourage everyone to operate with the same scrutinizing eye on the rest of the linebackers in the league that you do Tremaine Edmonds, and watch as many games of them as you do Buffalo Bills games. You see every single thing of Tremaine Edmonds. You see every game. How many games of Fred Warner have you seen? How many games of Darius Leonard have you seen? How many games of Micah Parsons have you seen? And I want to throw this out there too for people, because I know you guys aren't watching Micah Parsons. You want to know why Micah Parsons is on the edge? Yes, he's sweet rushing the passer. He can't cover, my man. He's got issues in coverage. Now, he's a rookie who still doesn't really understand the game. So the Cowboys did a great job of being like, okay, he's got this awesome skill set. Let's play to his strengths and take advantage of his versatility. They did that, and he crushed it. But there's a reason he's not sitting there dropping in coverage and carrying wide receivers up the field. And it's not just because he's a great rusher. It's because there are questions around his coverage ability. But watch everyone else with that same scrutinizing eye. And now, I'm at a 2.5 just because I think this grouping solid with Milano and Edmonds, but the depth and overall construction of how everything goes.
Where are you at on extending Edmonds?
Oh, so this one is also, Aaron, sorry, message in the chat. Of course not now, but I appreciate you. I don't know. Because it's all about the money for me. I looked it up. Right now, so his market value per Spot Track, and granted, Spot Track can be, wrong.
After I saw their Levi value, nothing makes sense to me.
And also, just for conversation's sake, Milano ended up signing. I think Milano's AAV last year was like 14 million or 15.
I think it was. Yeah.
So he was high. Right now, Edmonds' market value is $13.8 million per year. His projected contract is 4 years, $55.4 million. That would rank him as the 6th highest paid inside linebacker in the NFL. And then I'm looking at it from do I think he's the sixth best in the top 6 in terms of inside linebackers? No, I do not. But here's my worry with not locking him up, and I have 2 things in regards to it. One, I need to see how he plays with a 2-gapping defensive tackle. I truly believe if you allow him to play free and go sideline to sideline and not, again, we all know what his weakness is, letting blockers get into his kitchen and he has to stack and shed. He's not great at that. And it's a hard thing for linebackers. So let's try and reduce that. Let's let him move sideline to sideline, play free. He and Matt Milano, I think, would both benefit. I need to see what he looks like with a 2-gapping defensive tackle. And then, yeah, if we're paying him in that regard, I would like to keep Tremaine Edmonds. I don't want to keep him at a salary that pays him as the 6th highest paid inside linebacker in the league. But at the same token, it's kind of like similar to Deion Dawkins. Deion Dawkins got a contract that put him in the toppish tier of tackles. And then within a year and a half, he was back down like outside the top 10 again because of the deals that people got ahead of him. Also, we've talked about it multiple times. The salary cap is going to continue to go up. This TV deal that was signed last year, like COVID threw some things out of whack. There's a good chance we're looking 2-3 years from now and the salary cap is 220 to 230 million or more. And all of a sudden Edmonds' contract doesn't look as crazy. I am on keep Tremaine Edmonds as of right now. I don't think anyone's paying him Fred Warner or Darius Leonard money. In fact, that 13.8 AAV puts him in line with CJ Mosley, Zach Cunningham, Miles Jack, and Deion Jones.
Yeah, I think he's there.
The Falcons. And I
think
think
that only goes down after he signs it, right?
Yes, exactly.
People are only going to get paid more than that.
Every year he's going to be, by the third year, he'll be one of the lowest paid starting linebackers in the NFL. And I like that deal for him for a couple of reasons. He could sign it now and think to himself, well, I've guaranteed myself this money regardless of how my 5th-year option year goes. And I still have another contract to sign because he's still young enough. He could get another 4, 5, 6-year deal when he's ready in 4 years, if that's what the contract he signs now. So I like that idea for Edmonds. I would sign that today if that was if I were Brandon Beane. I'd be like, yes, you got it. Here you go.
And I also
sign the dotted line.
For me with that contract piece, I also, and this isn't because I'm not a stan. I don't even like Tremaine Edmonds that much. I think he's like a top 12-ish linebacker. Like that's what I think he is. But my issue with it is I don't know what the drop off looks like because what he does in his role, it's so demanding. We showed a play last night. And again, this doesn't absolve everything else and all the mistakes that he makes in the Chiefs game in the playoffs. Byron Pringle, who I would like the Bills to sign, who runs a 4.43 40-yard dash. He's lined up in the slot. He runs a seam route. Tremaine Edmonds carries him upfield and runs with him downfield for a good 20, 30 yards, and he's in perfect lockstep with him every single step of the way. That's hard. And not only is that hard, that's what is asked of that position in this defense. I don't know necessarily where you're getting that, even and you're only really going to get it to, Steve's point. You got to invest early. Like you got to grab a Nakobe Dean. You have to grab a Devin Lloyd. You have to grab one of these top
half of the first
exactly.
Round.
So I don't know how we're filling that position. And that's what I worry about, that drop off a little bit. I honestly believe if you get a 2-gapping defensive tackle, I think Edmonds makes a jump and then everybody's fine because he gets to play the role that he should be playing. So I am
on that contract goes from 13.9 to like Anthony said, to now you're
20. That's right. That's right. That's right. I'd be fine with extending him right now. I would prefer that AAV to be in the Milano range. Give me 10 or 11-ish. If he signs something under 12, I would be very happy. I don't want him to push up to 14. That's where I start to walk the line. But I think despite the fact that he has his weaknesses, he's tremendously important.
Here's what I'll say. You don't really see this in the National Football League, but because Tremaine Edmonds is so young, in other leagues, they call it a bridge deal, right?
Yeah.
Tremaine Edmonds gets like a 2-year, $24 million, 2-year, $30 million, 2-year, 28. Like
Sabres did it with Sam Reinhart.
Yeah, they give him a shorter deal. Like everyone's going to expect Tremaine Edmonds to sign some 5-year extension because of how young he is. But Tremaine Edmonds is like, well, if you put some 2-gappers in front of me, I sign a 2-year deal. I start playing exorbitantly better. I hit the free agent market at 27, and I get to cash out again. So I think a guy like Tremaine Edmonds, it's not like a thing that I hear about in football, but a bridge deal could be in line for a guy like Tremaine Edmonds.
What's interesting to think about too, even if it's like a bridge deal or not, because he's 23 right now, when he signs that deal next year, he has the chance to sign like 2 legitimately big linebackers.
Yeah.
Like he can sign 2 strong deals before age 30 and set
Tremaine
himself
Edmonds
up
might
very well.
Tremaine Edmonds might end up being like the highest paid defensive player by
That's
the
what
end
I
of his
mean.
career.
Especially when he switches to edge, the money he's going to get.
Oh,
on edge.
sacks. Sacks.
If you're his financial advisor, that's what you're telling him, right? Take the guaranteed money now before you go into this season, no
Right,
matter what it
stockpile
is.
it.
10 million, yes, 10 million for 4 years. Sign that now, and then let your play dictate what that next contract is. If you want to make, the highest paid linebacker type money at that point, but it's got to be a priority to extend. I get, like I said, I would be shocked if we don't hear that Bean at least put something on the table for Edmonds, and it's Edmonds' choice whether he accepts it or decides, no, I'm going to risk it with my 5th year and hope that I get that $25 million a year type deal from my play this year with maybe a better defensive tackles in front of him. And, I saw in the chat, but I completely vehemently disagree with the idea that you can't pay both linebackers a certain amount. We've already all mentioned it here in this defense on this Buffalo Bills team led by Sean McDermott runs through the linebackers. I mean, you can afford, we know that McDermott can turn scrubs into stars at the cornerback position. We know that defensive line edge hasn't been the strongest over the past few years with this defense, but it remains one of the top defenses in the NFL. Why? Because we have those 2 linebackers and everything else revolves around them. So you pay them and you figure everything else out.
I think that's also a fair point too. People talking about the money.
And the cap's only going up. So like when everybody
Exactly.
talks about what it looks like today, if you're paying 2 linebackers that amount of money going forward, the cap's going to go up. Other contracts are going to be able to be reworked. Like there's always different ways to adjust that. And if it is that important to you, I'm fine putting those.
I love this comment. Don't overpay like WCW did for Hall and Nash. That's amazing. Aaron, I saw you get a little smirk on your face too. I wanted to bring
Although I don't think it was an overpay. It
No,
was like
not
a
initially.
last-ditch effort
It was
to
tremendous.
keep that company alive.
When they got it, they won the Monday Night Wars, and then those contracts eventually came back to bite them in the butt and not value.
As Greg likes to remind us all the time.
That is true. Greg knows so much about wrestling. He loves it. I want to bring up this one. The comment says, don't overvalue inside linebacker. Trade Edmonds and use those picks to move up in the first round. The draft pick would get about $3 million a year for 4 years versus what you have to pay Tremaine. I want to say 2 things. One,
you're starting over though.
You're starting over.
You don't know what they're going to do.
You don't know if that player can fill Tremaine Edmonds' shoes. And the initial statement of don't overvalue inside linebacker. Inside linebacker in general in this defense is tremendously vital. What Edmonds and Milano have to do coming forward, dropping back, sideline to sideline, man and zone, everything. This position is tremendously important. This is not just okay, let that guy go and bring in someone else and there's no drop off. It takes time to adjust. There's a learning curve. There's a lot to consider. It's not just simply like, oh, ditch him and everybody else that we bring in will be fine and dandy and be better. And
time invested. That's something that the Bills need to consider too, of what they've already invested into Tremaine to get him to the position that he is right now and calling the defenses out. Like there's some invested capital already there. So like just moving on from that and starting from scratch, that's a thing.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. I want to pull up this last comic that was related to the NWO thing. Earl says Ayo, just like Scott Hall, aka Razor Ramon. Fantastic. I love it. I love
some of the best shoot videos on YouTube are Scott Hall.
Scott Hall's shooting. So he actually fell a couple days ago and broke his hip.
He ain't a young guy no more.
No, he's not. He's got a lot of
me, by the way.
I wish you knew what was up. He was having so much wrestling. I saw you start to tune out. I was like, he's not having he's not a fan. We'll move on here, although I enjoy the wrestling talk. I'll go first on this one as we continue to go round in this square, which doesn't really make sense. Corner. I feel like this isn't going to be a shock for anyone. I'm at 4.75 for a corner for 2 reasons. One, looking at this grouping right now under contract, Tre'Davious White, Taron Johnson, Cam Lewis, Dane Jackson, Nick McLeod, Tim Harris, Elijah Griffin. Tre'Davious White is a question mark to start this year. We're thinking the timeline puts him back somewhere around October-ish. So there's other timelines that have him like early November-ish. Remember, he tore his ACL on Thanksgiving Day. So ACLs are usually anywhere from a 10 to 12 month recovery period. You do not want to rush him, especially when you're a corner who needs their knees. It's not a position that you can like nurse that injury. But looking at CB2, Levi Wallace, who, Aaron, we know you love. Levi is somebody who is not sexy, but he's reliable at that corner 2 spot, right? He is an above average corner. We say it all the time. If your weakest link on defense is Levi Wallace, you have a good defense. Like that's it in a nutshell. But he is not here. There's a chance he doesn't come back. So there's a chance on opening day again.
Spot track's right, he's not coming back.
If Spot Track's right, yeah, that Spot Track AAV is at 9.5 mil. That's a lot. He ain't coming back for that. If you're looking at this group, you're all of a sudden, what do you have outside of these groupings? What do you have outside of Tre'Davious White and Dane Jackson and Taron Johnson? And to start this year, all of a sudden, if you don't have Trey right now on this group, you got Dane Jackson. What are you starting at corner 2? And even with Dane Jackson, you need, in my estimation, much like I said last year, you need a more scheme versatile corner 2. I mentioned it earlier in the show, the way defensive tackle unlocks other position groupings and other players. I think a more scheme versatile corner 2, preferably one that has some speed, but speed is not the only thing that matters. Give me someone who can man up, who can play zone, who can operate in press, who can operate in bail technique, head up, different turns, different angles and possibilities all start to open up, different games and schemes. This Bills defense, from a coverage perspective, they run a lot of specific games. If you are in a 3-by-1, they like to do very specific things. With their quarters coverage, they pattern match all the time, and then they'll mix in man coverage at different points. If you have guys at that corner position who are more scheme versatile, those games increase. Your ability to play rock, paper, scissors against all these teams that can throw different things at you, your ability to play that game increases. Corner is tremendously important from the scheme versatility standpoint for me, but even that aside, right now, the starting lineup for the Bills on opening day is Dane Jackson, and then who's starting at corner 2. And then behind that, even more of a question. I think there's a tremendous question mark in this group. And then even if we throw Saron Neal into the corner grouping, there's still question marks. Even Taron Johnson, who I love, knock on wood, he's changed his style a little bit. He's not as aggressive as he used to be when he was getting hurt early in his career. He's one of the best nickels in the league, especially with what he does. I don't think he's the best overall nickel in the league, but coming forward and fitting the run, he is the best nickel in the league coming forward and fitting the run. If he goes down and gets hurt, what do you do at nickel? Because Cam Lewis can't play that role like Taron Johnson can. You don't have depth and you don't have proven talent and scheme versatility in your corner group. That's my biggest thing, along with the fact that I think if you add a scheme versatile corner, it unlocks so much for the rest of your defense. I would like this addressed in the draft. I think corner is a potential free agent target. We mentioned a lot, Aaron is big fan of Dante Jackson. I like some of his tape as well. I think you dip your toe into that pool of the Sidney Jones, the Bryce Callahans, the Akella Witherspoons, someone in that regard, a 1 or 2 year deal, anywhere from like $3 to $4 or $5 million a year, something like that, depending on what's going on. My preference, give me a corner in the draft, preferably round 1. Give me Trent McDuffie. Give me Roger McCreary. I had a dream scenario of getting Kyler Gordon in round 2 from Washington. I don't think that's going to happen anymore because I think people realize that he's fantastic and he might go early round 2, maybe even round 1. I'd be okay with Kyler Gordon in round 1. Give me a corner in round 1. I'm okay with some of the guys in 2 and 3. But then you start to obviously drop in terms of talent, scheme versatility, and fit and all that stuff. But corner is a 4.75. It has to be addressed. I know it'll be addressed. It's just a matter of where. If Bean and McDermott decide that we can take a corner in round 1 versus piecemealing it together like they've done for the last several years. I've spoken a lot on this. I'm going to take a drink of water. Aaron, the floor is yours. Where are you at for corner in terms of priority ranking?
So for priority ranking, I'm at 4.5. Again, this is right there with defensive tackle for me. I didn't go into 4.7s, but I'll agree with you. It's right there for me. My only difference, I think, than you is I want to make sure that I'm addressing it in free agency. I know you said you want to address it in free agency, but I think the plan for me going into day 1, week 1, is to have a priority free agent that is going to be your starting cornerback, a Sidney, like you mentioned, Sidney Jones, Dante Jackson, like one of those guys that has that athleticism, address that in free agency so that if the board doesn't fall, if we see a run on cornerbacks from whatever 16 to 20 and we end up with the 5th best corner in the draft, that we have a guy already in place that's a veteran. And another reason is you talked about the scheme that the Bills run. It's not a complex scheme. right? Like it's not a crazy complex defense to run. It's actually pretty vanilla defense, but it's the communication and the pattern matching and all that stuff that goes into the back seven that I think provides a little bit of complexity for a lot of these corners coming into the league to get with it right away. That's why they talked about so much the continuity of bringing back the exact back seven last year and saying that continuity matters and playing next to each other. And we saw when the defense had struggles in 2020 when Matt Milano went out, and some of that communication that happens between Taron Johnson and linebackers and the safeties and linebackers and all those, that type of communication, it matters across the entire back seven. So I would love to have a guy that has those reps as a veteran, even if it's not reps here with the Bills, as a veteran in the NFL. I just value proven NFL production over what could be. And I think you address it in both ways. I think you attack it aggressively in free agency and get a guy, like you said, provides you some scheme versatility. And then if the board falls your way, round one, I'm happy to take a scheme versatile corner there too. But if the board doesn't fall your way, or say you have multiple options and Jordan Davis is available and one of these fancy corners is available, then you can get to just have that argument in the draft room, and you don't need to make that decision to run up and grab a player of need. So I think they got to address it multiple ways. I agree with you. It's a little bit sneaky, the need of slot depth. Cam Lewis is not a guy that's going to come up in the box and play the same way that Taron Johnson does. And because they utilize him as that third linebacker that allows them to stay in base nickel, like Taron goes down, that kind of destroys everything that you're trying to do and stay in your base. So that's a big one for me. So yeah, this is huge. This is a passing league. We all talk about how the passing stats, and you either are doing things to your team to increase on offense or to take it away on defense. And right now, what you listed in that Buffalo Bills cornerback room with Trey White maybe not coming back till Halloween, I don't feel great. I just don't feel great about this room right now. So I think you need to really, same with defensive tackle, add the cavalry, and it's going to come in both free agency and the draft.
I want to piggyback on that and just clarify, because I feel like I didn't clarify. That is also like someone needs to be signed in free agency before we go into the draft. Like I do not want to just, okay, cool, this is our corner room, leave it, draft someone, boom, good to go. Give me a free agent, one of these guys who we've already mentioned and spoke about. And then if we still get a corner in round one, awesome, or round two. I think, and honestly, I think that's like a perfect world scenario, but I want to address all these position of needs in free agency. And that way, when you go into the draft, it's literally just best player available. And if
Bean's going to try,
and that he's going to try, which he always does. And if Wyatt or Davis fall, defensive tackle. Oh, if Trent McDuffie falls, cool, corner. Oh, sweet, Jamison Williams is there, or one of these other sick wide receivers. Cool, it's going to be wide receiver. Oh, I don't know, Jermaine Johnson doesn't like teddy bears and he fell to 25. Cool, it's Jermaine Johnson.
Somebody ends up with a grass mask picture.
There you go.
Going around.
I will Photoshop that if necessary.
Yes, do it. Make it happen.
I tried doing it to Quinnen Williams a few years ago. Nobody took
it. Give that scenario so where it's a truly best player available with some need. But yeah, I second that as well. Steve, aside from your photoshopping abilities, what are your thoughts here on a corner group?
Level 4. The only reason I didn't go higher is because the Buffalo Bills do have the ability to patchwork. Like I believe in this coaching staff so much to the fact where, like, if it was Dane Jackson and Cam Lewis out there on the boundary next year, I think we would still be adequate. Like, would we be good? No, but would we survive? I think we could survive because I think they're that good with the way they coach up the secondary. Now, if one of those two got hurt, then we were royally screwed. But back to my point is, sign a guy and draft a guy. There are 3 positions on this team that we need to sign a guy and we need to draft a guy, to me. Tight end, defensive tackle, cornerback. Sign a guy, draft a guy at all 3 of those positions, because we got to get deeper at those 3 positions. If you're the Buffalo Bills, Levi Wallace, Dante Jackson, Sidney Jones, Akilah Witherspoon, DJ Reed, Hayward Jr. Why am I blanking on his first name?
Oh, Casey Hayward Jr.
Casey Hayward.
Yep. I was like, Cam Hayward can play corner, and we can get him from the Steelers.
That's versatile. That's versatile.
Mad versatile.
Steven Nelson, Bryce Callahan, Robert Alford, Xavier Rhodes, even like a reclamation project like Collar Fuller. Get a veteran in there that you can depend on until Trey White gets back in October. Find someone. Then in the draft, look at this first round. It's going to be Derek Stingley probably off the board first, maybe not, depending on some of his antics at the combine. Yeah. Sauce Gardner. Andrew Booth Jr., Trent McDuffie, Roger McCreary, Kyler Gordon. Like I'm no genius or anything, but one of those dudes is going to be there at 25.
Yes, correct.
So now all of a sudden you have like Sidney Jones and Roger McCreary to go along with Trey White coming back, and like say you have Roger McCreary, like he can go in and he can play nickel, or Kyler Gordon go play nickel if you need him. Trent McDuffie is nickel versatile. I'm team trade up for Sauce. If Sauce is sitting in there in the middle of the first round, and here's why, whether it's Dante Jackson or Sauce Gardner, I would like a cornerback that can be a little bit more physical at the line of scrimmage. Maybe a guy like Dante Jackson who's got the deep speed, who can turn his hips and run with some guys and recover if he gets beat. We talk about the pass rush. Pressure's not sacks. If we have some guys that can jam at the line, if we have some guys with some recovery speed,
some man coverage ability,
not afraid to get beat over the top, maybe those pressures turn into sacks. So maybe the Buffalo Bills get a little bit more aggressive on defense and get those sacks if their DBs, as you mentioned, are more scheme versatile. So I'm team sign a guy. I'm team draft a guy. I like some of the corners late. I really like Josh Williams from Fayetteville State. I think he's got some Kevin Johnson vibes to his game. I really like him. But I'm team sign one, draft one.
Cam Taylor-Britt's my crush right
I like
now.
it. He is someone the first game I watched of him was versus Oklahoma, and he was very bad. And I was off Cam Taylor-Britt. And then I watched 3 more games and I changed my tune. And I'm a fan of his as well. He's got some nastiness. He's scheme versatile. He can also like line up at safety and do some monster man stuff.
He would be a Hyde Poyer succession candidate.
That's also very fair. Someone who I like for that as well. I want to move Alontae Taylor to safety from Tennessee. I love his frame and his physicality, and some of those highlights are just so beautiful. But there's possibilities with that. Mr. Romeo, corner. You had a lot of facial expressions and head nods during us speaking.
Yeah,
so
I did. I think you all hit a lot of points, but I'm going to take it to the next level and say this is the one position I was on with you last week. This is a 5 for me. A 5. You're on fire. This needs to happen. You need to address this now. And the reason I say 5 is because Trey White, obviously, you don't know when he's coming back. He's your superstar. He's the guy you rely on at this position. And although we survived without him and did pretty well considering when he went out last season, you can't rely on that again. Right now, we have the opportunity to fix the position. We stuck with what we had in terms of, okay, is this roster deep enough? Here's who we got now. Now we're a lot thinner at the position, as you all alluded to, right? We don't have a lot of depth. If your CB1 is Dane Jackson, the room is on fire at this point. So you need to fix that, right? And it's a passing league, as Aaron said. I'm connecting all the dots here, right? As Aaron said, it's a passing league. And if your CB1 is Dane Jackson, this amazing team becomes a decent, maybe good team, because you're going to get targeted in the pass so much that you're going to be down in games, and that changes the tone a lot. So I think cornerback is an absolute sincere, one of the deepest needs on this team. You have to draft, you have to sign. And here's what I think they should do. You draft. I would love to have a first round cornerback. How many years have we been saying this now? Those of us who watch and are like, oh, if this guy falls, this will be a great fit for the Bills. And then the guy falls and they just miss him up and he gets picked in the second round or whatever before the Bills come around again. No trading up. I don't believe the Bills will trade up for a cornerback. I don't think that'll happen. I think, as you also mentioned, that the Bills are going to sit comfortably and say, you know what, we've made a few good decisions. We're comfortable. We're going to let the best player at the positions we need, whether that be defensive tackle, whether that's, cornerback, or whether that's wide receiver even, or something else that pops up for them. They're going to sit back and say, that's our guy at this position, and we'll take him there, and we'll figure out the rest. But cornerback, you have to draft. I think even if they do, a cornerback falls to them in the first round that they love, and they draft him. They draft one there, and they draft one later. 6th round, 7th round, somebody that McDermott can start to play with on the practice squad. Or
hold on, Anthony. What do you got, Mathis? Right to that point.
To Anthony's point about corner in the first round, if you look, and then again, this is my opinion and my draft board, you can find a heck of a lot more talented receiver in the second round than you will find a corner in the second round of this draft. Because these guys are the money guys on my list here. It's Stingley, it's Sauce, it's Booth, it's McDuffie, it's McCreary, it's Gordon. Then it's what? Kari Elam. To me, those guys are all going to go in the first round or very top of the second round max.
Fair. Yeah.
So you can go out and get yourself a pretty decent guy like a George Pickens or a John Mechie or somebody there. David Bell. Like there are a ton of dudes you can get in the second round at the draft at wide receiver. Go get yourself that corner in the first round, because even if like George Wilson or not George Wilson, man, I'm losing my mind tonight. Garrett Wilson, you have a better grade on Garrett Wilson than Roger McCreary, but it's close. Like you got it within an iota. You take Roger McCreary because you can go get a wide receiver in the second round that's a heck of a lot better than the comparable to the next best cornerback on the board.
Very good point. Sorry to interrupt you, Anthony, but I knew he wanted to get in on that.
That was excellent.
Point,
I like that addition because I agree completely. Cornerback, I would love to see one of them fall to us in the first round. I don't believe, even if they're all picked higher, I just don't believe McDermott's going to pull the trigger and say we need to trade up to get this guy or the last guy on that list if they think all 4 or 5 of them are pretty good wherever they are. Yeah. If one of them falls, they draft them. CB in the first round, I still think they draft cornerback later because that's what McDermott loves to do. And they're going to have a guy, like I said, you can put him on the practice squad, you can develop him, and he'll be, your third guy in a couple of years if you get lucky in that sense. You also, again, you're talking Dane Jackson at CB1. No, right? Absolutely not. Dane Jackson at CB2 is not an ideal situation. I think you also have to then approach free agency and say, what is our budget for cornerback? I want 2 of them. So that's your budget. Is your budget $10 million? Then you get Levi and whatever, depending on how much you give Levi, another veteran for a cheaper price. But you don't sign Levi, whether he actually gets $8 million a year or not. Say you're budgeting, $10 million. Great. You can sign a guy for 5 and 5 for 1-year deals. And we've seen with this Bean McDermott era, that's what they really love to do with these veteran players who are on free agency, right? Hey, come to Buffalo. We'll give you 1 year. You can be our starter, number 2, whatever it is. You can fill that third role. We'll rotate you in. We'll do whatever's ideal for your skill set. And I think skill set is going to come into play here. If they could find somebody to back up Taron in the slot, that would be ideal too. But I don't know that there's a lot of guys out there who can do that and be a potential CB1, CB2. But you
Kyle
gotta.
Fuller could be a flyer, right?
like that.
Kyle Fuller is a reclamation. Like I'm not saying you want to sign Kyle Fuller to be but in your scenario where you want to get a second veteran, you might be able to get Kyle Fuller for $2-3 million on a 1-year prove it deal.
And you nailed it on the head. Exactly what I think McDermott and Bean are going to target. They're going to say, okay, steady veteran who we trust. You guys name the names. Great. We're going to pay you. Pick one of those names. $5 million for this 1 year, or $6 million, or whatever it is. It needs to be to get them in the room. You need a guy like that who can be a CB1 with experience, basically. And then you look for, all right, who do we like that has potential that could be a, low risk, high reward type of guy, right? Well, okay, great. Fuller, bring him in. Whoever it is that they decide, they've done a great job with that in the past at positions. And now I feel cornerback is the position to do that in. I in no way believe that they're going to, find some big free agent cornerback or spend a lot of money here. But if they will draft, they will assign for sure. I want at least 2 veterans signed in that manner and at least 1 drafted fairly high, top 3 rounds. If anything, I want one in the first round, one of those top guys. And then you also have the flexibility to say, Trey White, where is your injury at? I don't want to see Trey White at 80% at all in the regular season. No, you sit on the bench. We can play without you. We can make it work. We might not be 15-2, but you know what? We will be however good to win the division still, I think. Even without Trey, we'll win the division and we'll be in a good seed, and you can have Trey White healthy and 100% throughout the playoffs. That's what matters if you want to win a Super Bowl. You paste it together. You figure it out during the season. You let Trey White sit as long as he needs to, all the way through the regular season if need be. You prepare for that. That's what I'm saying now. You need to prepare for Trey White to be gone all next season until the postseason when you can bring him in and he can be 100%. Hopefully that doesn't happen, and ideally he would feel 100% coming back in November or December or even earlier than that. That would be amazing. But you have to prepare for the worst case scenario.
I think, then that's right in line with everything else that we got. Like, it's a high priority position, much like defensive tackle. I think, again, the amount of time we spent talking about it, the priority in terms of what moves to make and how you look, and the rankings all support it. And it's something, again, that it's good for the position itself and the potential to unlock other players, other position groupings. We switched to our last one, Mr. Aaron Quinn.
I'm
You are
bouncing
out.
out of here. I got to go pee before Cover One Buffalo show comes on. And it's
Double
gonna be
duty
too tight.
tonight. Yeah.
Safety for me is 1. Poirier and Hyde are freaking all pros. Everybody else can eat it. Bye. Love you guys.
Jaquan Johnson's the truth. Godspeed, Aaron.
Ah,
Appreciate you stopping
see you in a
by.
few.
That's the way to send him off. Oh,
can
he
I-
came back down.
Yeah.
Can I say something about safeties, Anthony? I want your take on
You
this.
sure can.
You thought I was talking about this guy earlier in the show. The Dave Aranda, Sean McDermott connection. Obviously, Dave Aranda was the defensive coordinator at LSU. He gave Trey
Yes.
White the seal of approval before the Buffalo Bills took him late in the first round. Sean McDermott's first draft. Dave Aranda's been leading that Baylor defense. Jalen Petrie had an amazing Senior Bowl. He plays that star role in that Baylor defense where he could play nickel corner, he could play linebacker, he could play safety. He's just so absolutely versatile. People were down my throat on Twitter when I did a mock draft the other day, and I put him at pick 25. I can envision a world. I think Jalen Petrie is a good enough football player to make the Buffalo Bills absolutely ensorcelled with his play and take him in the first round. I really do think he's that caliber of a football player. Am I crazy? Because I know this. Everyone wants a player who's going to play right away. I'm in agreement with you. I would disagree. I love the player. I would disagree with the pick because of where we are right now.
Mm-hmm.
But we've seen the Buffalo Bills take guys like stack players when they probably shouldn't be stacking players. We've seen them. When's the last time we had a second round pick that contributed right away? Like we have shown that we are willing to draft players and sit on them. Is Jalen Petrie a guy that you think could get the Buffalo Bills straying in that dangerous type of territory?
You know what? That's a question I've literally been wrestling back and forth with because his skill set, one, I'll say for the safety position, safety is this like weird sneaky need because I think Hyde and Poyer both have, 2 to 3 years left of prime safety ability, but they do so much for this defense. And if one of them goes down or one of them is not there, like the whole identity of this defense changes. So you have to re-up that position at some point. You have to restock the cupboard. And I love your connection with like early picks, especially round 2. AJ Epinesa gets picked, kind of sits. Carlos Basham gets picked, kind of sits. I'm okay with, I've seen, Claude just said in the chat, he prefers Dax Hill to Petrie. I've seen a couple people throw Petrie and Dax Hill out into first round potential for the Bills. I'm okay with that idea because of like what it does. Now, would I prefer a defensive tackle or a corner or other areas of need? Yes, because that's where I'm at for this year and for going forward. But especially with what we've seen for some of this stuff from the Bills defense, like I love the idea of big nickel. I just don't know how realistic it is. And the first thing I think of when I think of Petrie, so I remember looking up, I don't have it off the top of my head before I started looking at him, and I only watched one game of film. And I'm going to go back and do more when I fully do safeties. But how many nickel snaps he got? Like I expected to see more safety than slot corner snaps. He had more slot corner than safety snaps. And I was like, so you get a guy who offers you some nickel versatility, who can play safety, thick dime, big nickel, whatever you want to go with, like thick that guy who's a mess. So what I like the idea, why I like the idea is you get someone who, against certain teams that want to spread you out, the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Chargers, these kind of teams, you have somebody who you kind of have this like mix and match Swiss Army knife who you all of a sudden can change things a little bit and change numbers and play some games and change some things. I don't know how well it fits for 2022, given the needs that this team has. But if he was our safety waiting in the wings and gets some spot duty for some cool stuff, I'm fine with it. I think it'd be awesome. I don't know where I'm taking him in this draft, given who's on the board because of the needs that we have. But I really, really, really like him as a prospect, given his versatility and what he can do.
For the record, I am on the that is crazy side of things for that. I do think that is crazy. I mean, I believe in the potential of the player. I think that's awesome. And even if you have him high, that's great. But I just don't think that would be a good move for the Buffalo Bills with where they're at right now. I mean, do you believe in Hamlin as the third guy who can step up? They've certainly talked him up, right? And said that he took a big leap and they really like him. It's going to be a position I could see them drafting, I guess, if they needed to, but because they like to go best player available. But in my mind, going in the first round when you have lots of other big needs to fill, defensive tackle, cornerback, all the ones we talked about so far, I would probably be like, okay, now you have some explaining to do. And there was a bit of that last year, so maybe it's not that insane or improbable, but I do think it's crazy.
All right, so I'll throw in a situation where if Petrie does slip, and then now again you're talking about a scenario where a guy slips, not even the second round. Like I could see the Buffalo Bills, maybe mortgaging a third and a fourth, move up to the top of the third or back into the second. So it's like, all right, we used a third and a fourth on Petrie, so we used a shit ton of capital, but we got our guy, and we still got 2 other guys on the first 2 days of the draft that could contribute in other areas, maybe more so than a Jalen Petrie. And people call me nuts, but and it's not even so much Dax Hill, even though I think Dax Hill is probably the better safety prospect. I just think Jalen Petrie is a guy the Buffalo Bills are just going to absolutely fall in love with, like just head over heels. The stars align for a guy like Jalen Petrie, and the front office fall in love with that dude, whether it's Sean McDermott or Leslie Frazier or Brandon. Like they're going to fall for that dude. Like that's a name you're going to hear a lot about. My guess is they'll probably talk to him at the combine in the coming days. My guess is he'll probably come in for a pre-draft visit if they do pre-draft visits this year. I legitimately think you'll probably see Brandon Beane and Sean Actually, I take it back. You might not see Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott at Baylor's Pro Day because they might be trying to hide their liking, and they have that relationship with Dave Aranda, so they might not need to be at the Pro Day. But
I always go back to that. I wanted Jeremy Chin so bad, even though I knew it wouldn't make sense. But all the reported interest that here's why. The reason why I don't think it's full crazy. I prefer other things, but the reason I don't think it's full crazy, the thing that always comes back to me is the Bills' interest in Kyle Duggar. And the fact that they were strongly considering drafting him and bringing him
Joe
in.
B says he was the pick.
Like now I don't have that inside knowledge, so I don't know. That's a huge thing given the roster construction at that time is basically the same roster construction you have right now. So
Teron hadn't popped yet, though. That is the one thing.
Teron had not popped. No, but if you take that, granted, the team is not completely the same in terms of how the personnel has evolved and started to develop. But the fact that they were willing to consider him there, given the other needs and holes that they had at that time, makes me think that's why it's not full on crazy. One, I like him as a talent and as a football player. But the fact that it always not trips me out, but the fact that they were considering Kyle Duggar there always makes me think like, maybe it really is best player available no matter what that position is. If their best player available is a kicker in round 2, they might go kicker because they're like, nope, he's the best player on the board. We're taking best player on the board. Like that's the only thing that makes me think like, nuts. You know what? Maybe it's not nothing. Maybe a small probability or a small chance, but I think to use what's Greg's thing, it's a non-zero chance.
Non-zero chance.
If you really, and he does tick several boxes, and it's cool to have a Swiss Army knife guy like that. And interesting start here for the combo. I guess, Steve, we'll stay with you here. Yeah. So safety priority ranking for this group, this offseason, what do you got?
I give it a 1. I mean, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, obviously your established starters. Jordan Poyer is going into a contract year. My guess is I wouldn't even be surprised if they extend Jordan Poyer again. So that'd be super interesting. Obviously, I think Jaquan Johnson has sort of played out. I don't think he's gonna be a defensive. I don't think playing defense is in the cards for Jaquan Johnson for the Buffalo Bills. But I do think they're really high on Josh Thomas from Appalachian State. I do think that they're high on DeMar Hamlin. I don't know whether those guys could ever be the caliber of player that Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are, and that's why I can't give it a 0. Right? Like you got to bring in some competition for these guys. I have one free agent on my list, and that was Malik Hooker, as a former first-round pick, a guy that maybe you can get him on some term, but I doubt it. That was the only free agent I had on my list. And then, looking in, Nick Cross is a great safety prospect late. I like Brian Cook. I like JT Woods. I like Reed Blankenship, but that's just more DeMar Hamlin, Josh Thomas. The 2 guys I sort of zeroed in on in the draft in the mid to late rounds, a guy that you might be able to speak on because I think you've watched some Oregon tape. Verone McKinley gives you some flexibility. I don't understand why. I mean, this is a guy that many people thought were going to be in the Dax Hill, Jalen Petrie, Jaquan Brisker range, and he's just completely fallen off into TDN has him in the 7th round, which is fucking outrageous.
Yeah, and he first popped for me in the game against Ohio State when they beat Ohio State. He kept making plays, and I was like, I wonder when this dude's eligibility is. And I looked it up right away, and I was like, he will come out this year.
Nickel flex. He could play nickel. He could play safety. He could drop back into center field. Really like Verone McKinley. And the other guy is Bubba Bolden, former USC highly sought after recruit, transferred to Miami, where he played with Manny Diaz, who was another coach that's super tight with Sean McDermott. So there could be some McDermott, Manny Diaz connections. The Buffalo Bills maybe draft in the 6th or 7th round, the athletic profile of a Bubba Bolden, thinking they can turn him into something. So those are the two safeties that I had sort of circled on my list. Just bring in some turn that bottom of the roster, bring in some guys with some maybe high-end traits that maybe, because like Josh Thomas and DeMar Hamlin don't have high-end traits.
Correct.
Bring in some guys with high-end traits.
That's a very interesting thought, and I like the names that you started to mention in the safety class. I'm excited to fully dive into the class. I've watched a little bit of Hill and a little bit of Petrie, a little bit of Lewisine from Georgia, who I really like. He just comes forward and mauls dudes in the run game, but he can also cover and offer some versatility there. But Anthony, you're next up in the rotation here as we continue this clockwise notion, whatever. What are your thoughts here, safety?
Yeah, I'm at a 1. I would be perfectly happy if they did nothing, right? If we didn't draft, didn't sign, I'm okay. We have what we need for this roster in my mind. And you're right that would it be nice to have depth? I love what Judge said at the end there. I think put him at the end, right? 6th round safety who has talent and upside, just like I said on cornerback. I think that would be McDermott's favorite thing to do, right? Let me bring in this guy. Let me teach him our ways and let me get him to reach his potential as he's on the practice squad so that when somebody goes down, we now have a reliable guy behind them who can be the number 2 now that whoever was the 2 became the 1, right? And you're probably not giving whoever, if it's Hamlin or not, if he's 3 and Hyde or Poyer goes down, then he becomes a starter. He's not getting as many reps as Hyde and Poyer do, right? So you need a 4th at that point to be the one who's spelling and rotating into depending on the down and the play and all of that to their talents. You got to match that up. So I like the idea of drafting one late, but if we drafted one early, count me into the I have no idea what's happening right now category.
RB in running back in round 1, safety in round 2. God. What do you do on draft night?
Anthony's worst case scenario draft.
I would
just burn the world to the ground at that point.
Oh my God. That would be wild. Yeah, it's an interesting grouping. Like I'm in the similar boat. I'm at I put 2 just because of like long-term depth, but if we're solely focusing on like 2022, I'm at a 1 as well. Like I'm comfortable enough in Hamlin and Johnson being the backup guys. They're not as scheme versatile. They have question marks. Hyde and Poyer are tremendous, but I've had these questions for the last several years about the depth. Even when Dean Marlowe was here, like he can't do the scheme versatile roles that Hyde and Poyer can.
UFA Dean Marlowe, by the way.
UFA Dean Marlowe, very interesting. No longer with the Lions. Like I have questions about the depth. I don't have any questions about Hyde and Poyer, and I do like several of the late safeties that are projected to go late in this draft. And after you get past the 4th round, there's always teams are just going for like guys that they like or need. So you just have people who just keep falling and falling for no reason, and then you're just sitting there, and it's like, okay, like let's take this guy. You never know what someone's going to take.
It's almost like teams like predetermine that they're going to take a 7th round guy that they fall in love with in the 5th round. So now all these guys who should have been like 4th or 5th rounders are dropping like flies because the teams just refuse. They're like, they've fallen in love with this 7th rounder that they're taking in the 5th.
It's weird. DeMar Hamlin's a good example. I remember watching the draft last year, and Mel Kiper Dane Jackson's a good example. And I always remember Hamlin last year and Mel Kiper just basically yelling at the TV, just being like, Hamlin's my number 1 guy. And he was doing it for like from the 5th round on. Yeah, he just kept going and going.
Still number 1 on my big board. I do remember that. Yeah.
Mel just hates it because it makes him look stupid.
Yeah. It's wild, like what can happen in the draft. And yeah, I also think from like a likelihood that they add, I could see them not doing anything with this safety group this offseason. You got Poyer, Hyde.
You can't go with 5 guys. You need a body.
Well, I mean, it depends.
Like UDFA.
One, Poyer, Hyde, Jaquan Johnson, DeMar Hamlin, Josh Thomas. Saron Neal is more corner than safety, I guess. So yeah, maybe they draft someone later, a UFA. They probably bring in another body, maybe one, and that's it. And then we're sitting here with this grouping, which is top heavy but sweet. But yeah, it's something to look forward to. I don't mean look forward and like, oh yeah, look forward to it like Christmas morning. I mean, look forward like they need to look forward towards the future at some point. Not yet, but at some point. We went long on this episode, almost a full 2 hours. I want to say something first to everybody who's still here because we're still rocking with 119 live guests. When we're done here, go pee, get some water, get a snack, come right back because Greg and Aaron are here with the Cover One Buffalo show at 9:00, ready to give you some more knowledge and insight and fantastic things. I want to thank everybody who joined us live and rode with us live here on this episode. The chat was hopping. The conversation was good, very thoughtful, very engaging. It was tremendous. So thank you very much for those of you, or to those of you who rode with us live in this episode. If you didn't ride with us live and you're watching later, listening later, whatever have you, thank you so much for your view, your listen, your download, anything like that. Whether you're watching live now or listening later, please drop a like on your way out while you're here. If you're here now, drop a like. If not, drop one later. I say it all the time. I know it's corny. You'd be surprised how much a like goes towards helping us track and trend in front of more eyes. If you're listening on the podcasting apps and platforms, please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage, to Cover One as a whole, and all the other tremendous shows that we've got. The Air Raid Hour that Mr. Steve Mathis is a co-host of, the Huff Podcast and Mr. Anthony Romeo was on, the Cover One Buffalo show that Aaron is on, that he had to go start to prep for, that they go at 9. We got you covered every single day of the week. Subscribe to Cover One on YouTube. We appreciate you guys more than you can possibly know. Thank you very much for the super chats that were donated to this show. Silas, you were killing it. Appreciate you. You did it multiple times. I appreciate all the super chats and the comments just in general. And then my last thank you, but arguably my most important, to you gentlemen. Thank you to Aaron. I know he had to go, but I messaged him. I'm appreciative of him. Steve, this is your first time on the show. Super pumped that we finally got to do this. You crushed it. Your level of detail and how prepared you were. Anthony, you showed up late, but you brought the goods when you came. Yeah, but you brought the goods. And I can't be too mad because we have the same name, and that name is fantastic.
Right.
But thank you guys so much for being here. Real quick, we'll give a quick send-off as we go. Steve, let everybody know where they can find you, Twitter, whatever, your show, all that stuff. Plug it, and we'll bounce.
You know what? Honestly, I'm getting sick of people communicating with me on Twitter because everyone just disagrees with me and gets me triggered. So I guess I could share my Twitter. It's at the Bills Guys. That's our show account. Very simple. But Mondays and Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Central, the Air Raid Hour. We try our best as we can to make it a comment-driven show. So, I mean, from the very start to the very end, we like to say that the comment section is the third host of our show. We like to, play fast and loose and just we come with a topic every week and we just dive in. And, we've been going 2 hours lately. We're talking combine this week, obviously free agency next week. So join us on the Air Raid Hour Monday and Thursday. If you haven't already, check this out. I think it's a good time. So that's really all that matters, right?
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair. Anthony, people should know by now, but just in case they don't, where can they find you? What do you do?
At Anthony Romeo NY. You can find me on the Hoof podcast and on Disguise Coverage with Anthony Prohaska every single week moving forward with my royalty checks coming in the mail. No, it's been great to be on with you, Anthony, these few weeks that the Hoof has been off. We are coming back next week, so we will be on. Looking forward to that. Definitely looking forward to interacting with everybody again. Thanks as always for a great show.
Hell yeah, I appreciate you guys. You guys crushed it. Everybody in the chat crushed it. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ ANT. Give myself a follow. Give Mr. Mathis a follow. Mr. Romeo a follow. You guys know what is up. Thank you guys so much, as always, everybody who watched. And again, to you, Steve, and you, Anthony, thank you so much for answering the bat signal, joining me here, crushing it. To everyone, hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. I will see you next week. And as always, go Bills.